The endless sea of crimson flames dimmed, swallowed by a consuming abyss of darkness. Xiaofeng gasped, his limbs flailing as if drowning in an unseen tide, desperately reaching for something, anything, to anchor himself. The suffocating void threatened to pull him under. Then, like the first break of dawn, a piercing red light flared before him. A sliver of warmth seeped into his body, coaxing his strength to return. Clenching his teeth, Xiaofeng willed himself forward. Step by step, he struggled toward the glow, his breath ragged and desperate. As he moved, the scarlet radiance shifted, deepening into pure white. The darkness shrank back, devoured in an instant, leaving only the blinding brilliance behind. A sharp gasp tore from his lips. Xiaofeng shot upright, his chest rising and falling in erratic rhythm. Sweat slicked his skin as the memory of smothering smoke and searing heat lingered in his mind. In his nightmare, he had been trapped, helpless beneath an overwhelming blaze. No escape, no resistance, just the bitter knowledge that he was about to be consumed. His pulse pounded in his ears as he forced himself to breathe. The dream had felt too real. Even now, the phantom heat clung to his skin. Slowly, clarity returned. The library. He had spent the night buried under a mountain of reference books, stubbornly pushing through his essay. No wonder I dreamed of fire, Xiaofeng muttered dryly. I've been burning my life away. Shaking off the unease, he reached for his belongings. Or rather, he tried. His fingers met nothing but rough fabric. The air left his lungs as he registered his surroundings, or rather, the absence of them. Gone were the sleek wooden desks, the towering shelves of books, the dim glow of his laptop screen. Instead, a frayed black blanket draped over him, its fibers worn with age. Beneath him was no cushioned library chair, but a narrow wooden cot. His breath hitched. Eyes wide, he scanned the space. The dim shack around him was a far cry from the familiar walls of the university. A crude wooden table stood lopsided in one corner, its legs uneven. A pair of wobbly stools flanked it, their surfaces splintered with time. Against the wall, an old crate, its top half broken, leaned precariously. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and cold ash. By the deteriorated door, a rusted stove stood lifeless, its fire long extinguished. Xiaofeng's pulse hammered against his ribs. His body felt weak, sluggish, like he had been ill for days. Where the hell am I? His voice cracked. Even in a hospital, this would be unthinkable. This place, this shack, looked like something ripped from history. A wave of dizziness surged through him as he attempted to stand. His legs buckled instantly, and he barely managed to catch himself against the bedside. His breathing was uneven, his limbs trembling under his weight. This feels like... He swallowed hard, a hazy memory surfacing. The pneumonia I had in high school. His mind raced, grasping at explanations, but nothing made sense. Then a sound, a distant cry, rising above the eerie silence. Burn the witch! Audiobook Cathedral is going to burn a witch. Everyone, gather! Burn that damned witch to ashes. The voices carried a strange, almost archaic accent. The mingling tones of fear and excitement sent a shiver down Xiaofeng's spine. Witch? His confusion deepened. Before he could process the words, a loud crash shattered the stillness. The door burst open. A boy, no older than 12 or 13, rushed in, his brown hair messy, his face streaked with soot. His wide eyes locked onto Xiaofeng, and in an instant, his face lit up in sheer relief. Lucian! The name hit Xiaofeng like a slap. The boy skidded to a stop beside the cot, his breath coming in ragged pants. His rough linen clothes barely reached his knees, dirt clinging to the fabric. You're awake. Thank the gods. The boy's voice cracked with emotion. Mom didn't believe me. She cried every night saying, my poor little Evan's like you were already dead. Xiaofeng remained frozen, his mind a whirlwind of fragmented thoughts. Lucian? Who the hell was Lucian? Yet the way the boy spoke, his familiarity, his certainty, sent an unsettling chill through him. Xiaofeng started, only to falter. His thoughts raced. Which? Cathedral. Burn. Audieron? A ridiculous possibility took root in his mind, one that made his fingers go cold. Am I in another world? Another time? His breath came faster. No, this had to be a dream, another vivid, twisted nightmare. But everything was too real. The smells, the sensations, the overwhelming exhaustion clinging to his bones. Lucien. The name felt foreign on his tongue. That's me. The boy didn't seem fazed by his hesitation. If anything, he was too preoccupied with excitement. Dad even sent a message to Lord Ven's mansion for help. My brother's a knight squire now, you know. No way would that greedy doctor dare demand his ridiculous price in front of a squire. The boy grinned proudly. But I was right. He grabbed Xiaofeng's wrist, his grip tight with urgency. Come on, you have to see this. They're going to burn that witch. It's the very same one who got you thrown in jail. The one who had you locked up and questioned all night by the church guards. Xiaofeng stiffened. The witch was connected to him? His heart pounded. Logic told him to stay, to process, to figure out where the hell he was. But curiosity, raw, irresistible, won out. With the boy pulling him along, Xiaofeng stumbled forward, out of the shack and into the open air. A wave of warmth greeted him. The streets were lined with people, their coarse linen clothes dusted with dirt. Men with narrow-sleeved tunics and simple shoes. Women in long, faded dresses with deep pockets. Brown hair, brown eyes, faces sun-worn and hardened by life. Xiaofeng's breath caught. This is real. The overwhelming simplicity of their clothing, the handmade nature of their belongings. Everything screamed an era long before his own. As they broke past the slums, the site of the cathedral came into view. The towering structure loomed over the town, its arched ceilings stretching toward the heavens. A massive white cross adorned the highest point, its surface pristine against the sky. The narrow windows beneath it barely let in light, adding to its ominous presence. People gathered in the square, their voices a frenzied storm. Xiaofeng found himself pressed to the front, the crowd shifting as they hurled stones and curses. In the center stood a woman, bound to a wooden post. She was beautiful, pale-skinned, her black robes dirted and torn. Even as the crowd jeered, she remained motionless, her lips pressed into a firm line. Above them all, a man in gold-embroidered white robes raised a hand. Silence fell like a blade. Xiaofeng barely had time to process before the man's cross erupted in light. Blinding, all-consuming light. The flames ignited instantly. The woman laughed, her voice like a haunting melody. In the flames, I will see your cathedral crumble. In the flames, I will see your heaven burn. In the flames, I will see your world fall. Xiaofeng's breath stopped. This wasn't medieval Europe. This was a world where magic existed, and his name was Lucien. The square lay silent, save for the embers still flickering on the gallows. The witch was gone, reduced to nothing but ash, yet her maniacal laughter and curses clung to the air like a lingering specter. Even as the flames had devoured her, her voice had refused to die, a chilling echo that sent shudders down the spines of those who had watched her burn. Fear settled like a fog over the gathered townsfolk. They glanced around nervously before flocking into the cathedral, eager to pray, to confess, to reassure themselves that they were still safe under the divine gaze of the light. Lucien stood frozen in place. The afterimage of that blazing divine light was still seared into his vision, an undeniable reminder of the overwhelming power it had held. It had been sacred, dominant, absolute. Unlike the others, he didn't feel terror or reverence. He felt curiosity. Could he learn it? Before he could dwell on the thought, a heavy slap landed on his left shoulder, nearly knocking him off his feet. Oh, my poor little Evans. Thank the gods. Thank the gods you didn't end up like your father. Lucien staggered, his ribs aching from the force. Turning, he found himself face to face with a large middle-aged woman, her hands the size of bare paws, her face streaked with tears of joy. She kept patting his shoulder, her excitement oblivious to the fact that she was beating the life out of him. Lucien grimaced. He had no idea who she was. In fact, he didn't even know his own full name. Should I be Lucian Evans? The thought flickered in his mind, uneasy and surreal. He hadn't inherited any memories from this body's previous owner, and that terrified him. If anyone suspected he wasn't who he appeared to be, that same divine light could be used to burn him alive. The woman's joyful expression turned pitiful as she noticed his hesitation. "My little Evans, you're still suffering from your illness, aren't you?" She sniffled, pressing a large hand to his cheek. "Look at you, so thin, so frail. Oh, what a tragedy." Lucian swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. He was about to speak when, thankfully, a man stepped in. "Elisa, let him be," the man said, his tone calm but firm. "He's just recovered. He must be tired." Lucian turned toward the speaker, a blonde-haired man, his frame lean, his back slightly bent forward as if weighed down by life itself. Yet, beneath the weariness, Lucian could tell he must have been handsome in his younger days. For Lucian, this man was nothing short of an angel for rescuing him from the situation. "Thanks, Annie Elisa. I'm fine, just a little dizzy," Lucian said cautiously. Elisa's son, a boy around 13, rolled his eyes at his mother. "I told you he wasn't going to die." "But no, you always baby him." Elisa continued, wiping away her tears. "It's just so good to see you well again, Evans," she exclaimed. Then her face darkened. That damned witch, she deserved it. Lucian flinched at the sudden shift. As they walked, she kept rambling, revealing pieces of information that made his stomach churn. "When she first moved near your home, she seemed so kind, so beautiful," Elisa muttered. "I even thought of marrying her to my little John. But she was a witch, stealing corpses from the cemetery for her wicked spells. If it weren't for the night watchman, who caught her in the act, who knows how many people she would have killed." Lucian listened intently, his mind racing. So, the witch had been his neighbor. Because of that, the Inquisition had dragged him in for questioning. They must have used some kind of divine magic to interrogate him. That explained why his memories were missing, why the real Lucian Evans had likely died, giving him this second chance. His fists clenched. He had to bury his old identity. If anyone suspected that he wasn't truly Lucian, they would burn him too. The blonde-haired man, Joel, seemed to notice his silence. He placed a reassuring hand on Lucian's shoulder. "She talks a lot, but don't take it to heart," he murmured. Lucian nodded absent-mindedly. Joel sighed. "She used to be so gentle, you know? But after she had John, it was like something changed, like she was possessed by a demon." At this, Elisa snorted. "I'll listen to the bard complain. You were once so romantic, so passionate, chasing your music dreams. But now, you're just a drunk." Joel winced. "Not anymore," he mumbled. "I stopped drinking when John started working." Elisa's eyes narrowed. "Good. We've pinned all our hopes on John and Ivan. If John awakens his blessing and becomes a knight, he could be nobility one day." Lucian tensed at the mention of a blessing. What was it? Some kind of power? Before he could dwell on it, Elisa turned to him with an apologetic smile. "Oh, Evans, I didn't mean to make you feel bad," she said hastily. "You're talented too. If only you had more training when you were younger." Joel laughed, patting Lucian's back. "Don't worry about it. Our Lucian is going to be a musician." Lucian blinked. "A musician?" Without thinking, he half-heartedly chuckled. "Yeah, I want to be a musician." Beside him, Ivan frowned, tugging at his sleeve. "Lucian, since when? You never told me that before." Lucian exhaled. 5 minutes ago," he deadpanned. Ivan's eyes widened in awe. "Oh, I see." After finally parting ways, Lucian shut the door to his shack, locking it from the inside. Then he collapsed onto the cot, burying his face into his hands. His body trembled. This was real. A world where magic existed. A world where witches were burned alive. His breathing hitched, his heart pounding. He wasn't ready for this. But fear wouldn't change reality. Lucian forced himself to calm down. He couldn't afford to panic. Not when his survival depended on adapting. His stomach growled, reminding him of another problem. He scoured his shack, finding 2 rock-hard loaves of black bread and 7 copper coins. Without hesitation, he bit into the bread, only to nearly shatter his teeth. What the hell? Is this wood? Desperate, he grabbed some flint and started a fire, roasting the bread until it softened. As he ate, he thought of the bishops, their power, their status. Could he learn that divine magic? Then a different idea struck him. What about the knowledge he had from his old world? Closing his eyes, he reached for his memories and froze. The entire library from his university, it was all there in his mind. His eyes widened in shock. Not just memories, actual books, categorized, stored like a personal archive. But as he tried to open them, he discovered a problem. Most of them were locked.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Since Lucian somehow managed to come to this completely different world, he was not that surprised or scared to find that he actually had a whole library in his mind. What confused him more was that most of the books were locked. He tried to remain calm so that the visuals of the books could be more solid or substantial as entities. He went through them one by one and recorded the ones that could be read and the ones that could not. History, no problem. Economics, yep. Arts, fine. Mathematics, physics, chemistry, and biology. Some of them are locked. Is it because I'm in a different world, so I cannot read these books? I can still come up with the knowledge I gained in my university, though it hasn't been blocked. Most of the unlocked books were of senior high or high school level, which was a small amount compared to teaching references of a university's general library. There were numerous other books locked there. Lucian was too weak to go through each category, and soon he was unable to concentrate anymore. He dragged his feet back to the bed to get a good sleep so that he could face his second day in this world better. Only one loaf of bread was left there. Survival was always the priority. Lucian, too, understood this. When his mind was getting dull, and he almost went into his sweet dream, a rat's piercing squeak and noises of wood biting woke him up. Rats? At first, he did not pay much attention to it. He turned over in bed and was ready to fall asleep again. But the noise was getting louder and more disturbing, like someone was grinding teeth on a rock. Lucian could not fall asleep anymore. He tried to cover his ears with the blanket, but the attempt was in vain. The noise had a penetrating power, and it felt like it was coming from all directions. Bloody hell! Feeling frustrated, Lucian cursed out loud. He was almost going insane. Food tasted like wood. Roughly cut clothes irritated his skin. The old blanket was full of holes. Now he could not even have a good sleep. Squeak, squeak. He heard squeaking noises like thousands of mice were scratching a wall. Lucian gnashed his teeth in anger. He decided to kill one or two of the rats to scare the rest of them away. He got out of his bed and tried to listen carefully. N/O/vel/B//N.C///OM. I gotta get rid of this life. Soon. Sob, cry. Now it was like someone was crying. Lucian tried to focus, but he found there was only ghastly, bitter crying lingering there. Someone was crying at midnight. Lucian's heart was beating fast, his brain flushed. Every hair on his body stood up. The freezing night wind blew through the broken door. Lucian grabbed the hard bread loaf to defend himself. The crying voice now sounded like a miserable song. Lucian was even more afraid now. It's a world of magic and divinity power. Probably there are ghosts and spirits too. Taking a deep breath, Lucian tried his very best to calm down and move towards the door. Someone was crying mournfully. The night was so quiet. It was like all his neighbors were lost in their dreams. It's coming from the right side of the wall. The closer Lucian got to the door, the clearer he could hear the crying voice. Wait. The witch. The witch used to live there. He was stunned, but her place had been burned down completely by the church. Maybe they missed something like a secret chamber. She might have stored her vicious experiments there. Lucian's mind went away a little bit. A secret chamber. Like many novels he read before, he could probably find the witch's treasure or even notes on magic. The piercing crying dragged him back to reality. Yeah, get real. Something must be guarding there. How can I fight against a ghost with a bread loaf in my hands? Probably I'd be killed and possessed by the evil ghosts. He got more careful now. Lucian was glad that his mind was not controlled by the greed. But he also did not want to keep waiting here. Nobody knew if the ghost would try to come for him. Lucian was thinking very fast. At the moment, he gathered all the strength he could muster and carefully grabbed the handle of the door. The bread in his hand was now soaked with his sweat. He slowly opened the door. It was very dark outside, and he could hear the whistling sound of cold wind. There was nothing terrifying there, and after he left his shack, the crying voice dimmed a bit. He felt a little bit relieved and took a deep breath, then started shouting as loud as he could. "Ghost! There's a ghost here!" It was so loud that even Lucian himself got surprised. Then came a series of roaring barks from the wild dogs, and Lucian started madly rushing to the cathedral. These guys were professionals in this kind of stuff. As the previous neighbor of the witch, he might still be under the church's watch, and there was one more benefit. Lucian's asking for help on his own could help him gain some of their trust while reducing the suspicion. Lucian shouted loudly to wake up the other neighbors, so that if they attempted to rob the treasure and frame him or even kill him for it, they wouldn't be able to do so in front of the crowd. He tried his best to think of every measure to save his life in such a short time. Soon, he saw the cathedral in front of him with candlelight casting out of the windows. 2 armored guards were guarding the front gate. Seeing Lucian running towards them in panic, one of the guards pulled half of his sword out to be alert. "What are you doing here?" the other guard asked as he reached out his hand to stop Lucian. Lucian answered with trembling voice, "Ghost. There's a ghost there, in the witch's place." The guard got nervous after hearing that. As a newly recruited guard, he could not tell whether Lucian was telling the truth or not. So, he asked his partner to stay and went back into the cathedral to report to the pastor on duty tonight. The noise from his chainmail gradually faded as he disappeared into the darkness. A short while later, a blond young pastor in a white robe walked out of the gate with the guard. The pastor had a thin face. He walked in an elegant rhythm. "I'm Pastor Benjamin. Can you tell me what happened?" The 2 guards were standing silently, in fear that any noise from them might disturb Pastor Benjamin. Lucian, politely and sincerely, described in detail how he heard the ghost's crying voice, how he got out of his place and ran here asking for their help. After hearing him, Benjamin gave Lucian a gentle smile. "You did well, my child. Your courage shows your devotion to God." Then he ordered the guards, "Thompson, get Gary, Paul, and the 2 other knights here." The witch was just an apprentice, so there's no need to report this to the bishop. "Yes, my lord," Thompson replied reverently. Although Benjamin was only an elementary-level pastor, he was capable of dealing with the traps or spells left by a sorcerer's apprentice. There was a huge gap between a formal pastor and an apprentice. Benjamin asked Lucian's name and stopped their conversation when the other 4 knights arrived. They were also wearing chain mails, but they looked much more imposing compared to the other 2 guards. A crowd had already gathered some distance away from the witch's burn cabin. Candlelight flickered like scattered stars as if accompanying the moon in the sky. Lucian discovered that the moon in this world was silver-colored. People stopped whispering when Benjamin showed up. The crowd suddenly felt relieved and started getting closer to the witch's cabin while talking to each other. "I don't hear anything, no matter if it's true or not. It does no harm to have a purification performed here." But Lucian could still hear the crying voice. He thought to himself, "Why can't these people hear it?" Benjamin, as if knowing what he was thinking, replied to Lucian calmly, "Yes. There are ghosts present here." Obviously, he heard it, as well as the 4 guards who nodded to show their consent. Pastor Benjamin elegantly moved towards the ruined witch's cabin. He talked in a low and gentle voice. "Vicious witches, they exploit people's psyche and awareness, especially like today's night, when the silver moon is present in the sky. That woman, fortunately, hasn't gained any real dark power. Her spells can only affect several individuals at most." He was clarifying why only Lucian could hear the crying voice. Before Lucian could ask, as if he knew what he wanted to ask, Benjamin reached out his hands wearing white gloves and continued, "We are blessed. So only we can hear the wicked crying." When Benjamin said that, the 4 guards instantly began drawing crosses on their chests and started yelling at the same time. "Only truth lives forever." They became more excited as they spoke. The crowd started praying as well. "Only truth lives forever." This is the power of divinity. Pastor Benjamin is truly blessed by God. Benjamin's face now looked more solemn and serious. He slowly opened his hands and spelled out an odd word. Paso. Instantly, a sheet of white light covered the ruins like it was coming from the moon. In the white light, a small scarlet hole emerged on the broken wall connecting it to Lucian's place. Like the surrounding people, the mysterious power also shocked Lucian. But, rather than being awed and respectful like the crowd, he yearned for the divinity. Benjamin put his hands back and ordered, "Gary, that is the door. It doesn't have any trap. Go and open it." Gary puffed out his chest as the sound of his chainmail clashing came. "Yes, my lord." As Gary walked past them, Lucian heard Benjamin complaining in a low voice. "Those haughty Inquisition bastards. Except magic trap detection, they never bother double-checking with secret door detection. They can't be so irresponsible just because she was an apprentice." Gary effortlessly broke down the wall with his strong muscle. The other guard hauled out his heavy sword and fiercely hacked. A black hole appeared in the corner of the wall. It was a narrow hole, enough for only one person to pass through. A stinking smell came from it, which made Lucian almost throw up. Lucian took a couple of steps backward, and he noticed that Benjamin was covering his nose and mouth with the right hand, with his eyebrows frowning. Gary reported, "This tunnel leads to the sewers." Benjamin was still frowning his eyebrows. His muffled voice came from under his covered mouth. "Are you sure?" "Yes. We can see the sewer from here." Gary was pretty certain. As an elegant and noble pastor from the long-established and honored Rafati family, Benjamin was more than reluctant to go down into the smelly, dirty pipes. He had not mastered a purifying spell yet, so he must rely on the runes and divinity instruments. But no one knew how long it would take to find the witch's chamber. Just a sorcerer apprentice, a Saint Truth badge, would be enough. Benjamin turned his eyes towards Lucian. His voice became solemn again. N/O/vel/B//and.C//OM. Lucian, you once lived near that vicious witch. Something evil must have contaminated you. But your devotion towards God touched me, and you deserve a chance to purify the evil in there, as well as yourself. Go, Lucian. I'm going to lend you my badge to help you. May God bless you. Lucian's brain started buzzing like it had just got hammered. He thought everything was going to be fine after he went to Pastor Benjamin and the guards. But the pastor told him to go down there. He was just an ordinary guy who recently recovered from illness. But now he had to go underground to face the devil. Were they kidding? Seeing Lucian's dumbfounded and hesitant face, Benjamin kindly asked, "You were saying?" "No." Lucian felt terrified hearing Benjamin's gentle voice. If he refused, he might again get suspected by the church. Besides, Benjamin will lend him the magic badge, and his guards were supposed to go with Lucian. Lucian thought this mission would not be that dangerous. Lucian had no choice, though. The crowd was praising Pastor Benjamin's generosity and the mercy of God. Lucian squeezed out a bitter smile and answered, "No, that would be my honor." The pastor just ignored Lucian's bitterness. He took off the badge on his neck and handed it to Lucian. "This is the Saint Truth badge. I'll cast a blessing spell on you as well, so you can focus better. When you chant the spell and touch the badge, you can call the power of God." Hearing his words, Lucian calmed down a little bit. Then he started getting curious about the badge. It was a gold badge embedded with a shining white cross, around which were different lines and patterns such as circles, squares, triangles. They were connected with each other, giving it an even more mysterious and solemn look. When Lucian was holding the badge, he felt a gentle and loving power penetrating all over his body. Even in the cold night, Lucian felt like he was standing under the warm sunshine. The badge contains 2 inferior spells, light and minor injury healing. It additionally contains 3 level 1 spells, Shield of Light, Sword of Light, and Holy Strike. Each can be used once a day. Now, pay attention to the chants. As an ordinary individual, Lucian understood how important these spells were to him. The spells were not long, but rather their tone was hard to master. It took him a while to barely remember them. Benjamin reached out his hand again, casting a beam of white light on Lucian. Lucian felt refreshed and much healthier after the light vanished. People's voices also became more clear to him. This guy got the badge from Pastor Benjamin. Oh, benevolent Lord Benjamin, we praise God. We praise the pastor. Lucian waited and watched Benjamin casting blessing on the guards. There was always an interval of 2 to 3 seconds between his castings. After the preparation, Benjamin said, "Paul, you stay at the entrance here. Gary, House and Corella, you going with Lucian?" His face then became serious as he drew a cross on his chest. "May the lights of God bless you. Only truth lives forever." Those guards got energized and started shouting. Lucian was a little bit slow. Standing there, he felt embarrassed. As they were walking towards the tunnel, the guard, Paul, went near Benjamin and asked in a low voice, "My lord, why him?" With the badge and spells, the guards could bring out the power as well. Despite the fact that they were slower than the pastors, they were still much better than a weak young boy. If Benjamin did not want to go down there on his own, he could still ask the guards to do the job. The pastor looked at the entrance of the secret passage and replied slowly, "His soul is stronger than the average person. He could do the work better. He's too old to be taught, though," he added. The mixed, stinking smell inside the hole made Lucian almost throw up. "You live in Audiobook, and you dislike the smell of pipe? It seems like you all are living a better life than I thought. In the city of Chant, Antefleur, poor people with nowhere to hide live in the sewers." Corella, a guy with black hair and big cheekbones, remarked unexpectedly. Before Lucian opened his mouth, Gary moved and shushed Corella. The latter shrugged his shoulders and stopped talking. He stepped forward and jumped into the pipes, followed by Lucian. Lucian stepped on something slippery. After taking a close look, he found that they were weird mosses. They were everywhere and slightly lighted the whole space. Gary kept his voice low. Housen, and Corella are high-level night squires. We'll try our best to protect you. When you are in danger, summon the Sword of Light as soon as possible." He wore blonde whiskers. Every movement of his was calm and confident. He seemed like the acknowledged leader of the 4 guards. Gary was holding the sword in his right hand and a small shield in the left. He took the lead and moved deeper into the darkness. The miserable crying was increasing louder and louder. It originated from all around. For ordinary people, it was almost impossible to tell the direction. But the special trained guards and blessed Lucian could easily find where the crying was coming from. No one was living down here, as Corella mentioned. The whole space was terrifyingly quiet except for the lingering, bitter crying. They passed several forks and stopped at a normal corner. Gary stared at the wall, which was fully covered by dark green moss, telling Lucian in a cool voice, "Summon the Sword of Light." Terrified and excited, Lucian calmed himself down under the help of blessing and began concentrating on the badge hanging on his neck, feeling the warm and soft power in it. He put his left hand on the badge and gently rubbed it, and at the same time, he whispered, "Giseren." Lucian's spirit blended with the white light and began to form into a shining sword. "This is my voice." Lucian was surprised. His voice sounded deep and husky. Lucian grabbed the sword. He could feel the power. Gary's order pulled him back to reality, slashed the wall there. His body trembled slightly. Lucian didn't know what he was going to face. Powerful magic? Evil ghost? Fatal trap? He had no idea. Corella sneered at him. Lucian knew he had no other choice. He took a deep breath, clenched his teeth, and screamed loudly in his mind. Death is not a big deal. He slashed the disgusting slippery wall with all his might. The stone was like a pile of mud before the sword. Something weird got cut inside as well. Lucian felt something breaking, with dark gas leaking and disappearing under the sword edge. The wall collapsed completely. Behind the wall, there was endless deep darkness. Suddenly, 2 weird, cold, hideous spots of red rose in the darkness. And then more and more scarlet spots started emerging, densely dotted. They resembled pairs of eyes. Confronting those red eyes, Lucian felt his hands and legs were shaking, his head buzzing. Different thoughts about what he should or should not do overwhelmed him, so he just stood there. Badge! I still have the badge. The badge was his greatest support. When Lucien was trying to concentrate and cast the shield spell, a sudden shout from Gary almost terrified him out of his wits. "Cast light." Gary's voice was calm and decisive. He shouted loudly to bring them back to the reality from fear. Right? Lucien realized that their top priority was to be able to see clearly. He rubbed the badge and murmured, "Gaia." A ball of white light appeared in front of them and pushed the darkness away. Then Lucien saw them, red-eyed rats of regular size. The floor, walls, and even a weird human-shaped plant were all covered with the black rats like a crazy swarm, giving Lucien goosebumps. The rats also saw their enemies. As soon as the light appeared, they started screaming and flooding towards the humans. At that moment, they managed to take a glimpse of the chamber. A desk was placed in the corner with 3 glowing books on it. Another flat, broad, weird-looking table was at the center of the room, drawn with different strange patterns, like red, blue, or green, similar to the St. Truth badge. There were also some small stoves, pots, and glass bottles. But they did not get enough time to notice details as those crazy, stinking monsters already jumped in front of them. Housen and Corella held their swords and shields, with their backs against Gary, in a simple formation. The leading rat threw himself right at Lucien. Its mouth was open wide, showing its 2 long and sharp fangs. Lucien raised his sword of light and hurriedly swung at the head of the red-eyed rat. However, he was too nervous to predict the rat's movement, and the blade missed, although the light coming out of the sword still caught it. Lucien could smell the rat's burning flesh. Its skin turned black and rolled up inwards. But the rat did not stop and was already in front of Lucien's face, as if it could not feel the pain. He could smell the rotting odor coming from its mouth. Lucien was too nervous to make the right decision. He tried to lift the sword once again and at the same time reached out his left hand to try to defend. Due to his panic, he almost dropped the sword. Feeling desperate, Lucien couldn't help but watch the creature about to sink its sharp teeth into his chest. At this critical point, a shining blade arrived and hacked the rat directly, splitting it in 2 parts. "Do not panic. Protect your vital parts. You still have the healing spell," commanded Gary. Corella also ordered in a sharp voice, "You idiot. Come here with us. You want to die standing at the front?" They were aware that Lucien was the only guy among them with a badge, which was very important to them. They could probably survive facing these insane rats without any spells, but no one knew what was waiting for them next. Lucien tried to calm himself down. The guards were well trained, so when facing dangers they knew what they should do. But Lucien, a little boy, could not protect himself. No one was born for fighting or with the ability to remain calm in the face of dangers. In this first real fight, the guidance from an experienced guard like Gary would be a precious lesson for Lucien in the future. After a moment, Lucien finally calmed down. While hacking with his sword, he gradually stepped back and joined the guards. Now, instead of 1 or 2, hundreds of rats started insanely attacking them. Lucien's sword was sharp and splendid. When he swung it, the sword was surrounded by a halo, and Lucien could see an almost solid afterimage of it through its path. According to Gary's command, Lucien's wielded the sword of light to shield them. Any rat that ran into him was cut down in half by his blade. The smoldering cuts burned rats' organs and skin charred without dropping a single drop of blood. Some of the strikes missed, but even then the fur and skin charred, and they became slower, crashing into the floor right before Lucien. The 3 guards were responsible for the remaining ones. "Ah, great job, kid," Corella whistled. Lucien did not feel satisfied, though. He could feel the power of the sword was gradually decreasing. Gary was still hacking the remaining ones. "Calm down. We have enough power to deal with these monsters." A new wave of attack came again, like a black swarm. Lucien was improving rapidly. Although still worried, he decided to trust himself and the 3 guards. The hacked bodies of dead rats fell to the ground like raindrops. But some red-eyed rats still managed to pass through the defense and move towards them quickly. They cannot handle all of them. Lucien was thinking worriedly. Nobody could wield a sword that fast. Of course, they were fighting not only with their swords. 2 small silver shields were cooperating with the swords. The crazy jumping rats could not stop in time and knocked directly into the metal. Many were twitching on the floor, and died soon. Corella laughed. You can't be a good knight without a shield. After several rounds of attack, the red-eyed rats changed their pattern. Instead of throwing themselves directly towards their faces, some started approaching through the floor, while others climbed on the wall to attack them from above. The situation again turned serious. Leave those coming from above to me, the tall Housen, who was silent all the time, said to them. Lucian nodded with appreciation, wielding his light sword to defend from the rats on the ground. Shield of light? Not yet. Gary shook his head. They were like a small boat floating in a roaring ocean. They could be easily destroyed. N/O/vel/b//and.c//om. Suddenly, Housen missed one rat, which fell directly on Corella's shoulder. The rat gave him a bitter bite in his neck. Corella groaned with pain and twitched his shoulder. I got bit. It's numb there. Their teeth must be poisonous. He swore bitterly. Let me do the healing. Lucian was about to rub the badge, but was stopped by Gary. Corella can still hang in there. There are too many rats. Save it after. Ouch! Before he finished, Gary got bit under his kneecap. Soon the guards started focusing on their unprotected parts. But unlike them who were wearing kneecaps, boots, and chain mails, Lucian was merely wearing linen short clothes. Suddenly, he got bit in his ankle. Feeling pain and numbness from his ankle, Lucian almost lost his balance. He felt thirsty at the same time. He wanted water. Protect yourself. Raise your shield of light first. Then use healing, Gary commanded. Half of the rats were dead already. Lucian quickly became focused and rubbed the badge. Simon, a white shield of light appeared and covered him. He would need more time to cast another spell, so he took a step forward, trying to cover his companions under the shield and the sword wall. After a couple of seconds, Lucian concentrated again. He rubbed the badge. Gordy, a white light radiated from the cross and covered his ankle. The numb feeling disappeared instantly. Although Corella and Gary were still injured, the situation had been turned around. The number of red-eyed rats decreased, so Lucian seized the chance and healed the wounded as well. Stabbing through the last rat, Corella sighed slightly. Finally over. The ground was covered with layers of dead bodies and dark blood. Standing there, Lucian could not believe he actually made it. Gary nodded to him. You did well, Lucian. Then he turned around. You guys did a good job, too. Corella's face looked weird. Then he answered in a confused and fearful voice. How? Housen's not here. The silent but reliable Housen, who was protecting them from behind, disappeared. Lucian started feeling creepy again. None of them heard any sound of struggling, screaming, or of anyone leaving. The robust and silent Housen, a high-level knight squire, just disappeared. A chilly feeling rose from Lucian's feet and quickly spread all over his body. He held the hilt of his sword tight, and his breathing became heavier. He quickly turned his head but saw nothing. The sewer wall on the other side was covered with weird shining green moss. Suddenly, a bitter scream broke the deadly silence. Lucian quickly turned and saw a terrifying scene. A monstrous rat as big as a man had tripped Corella and sunk its sharp nails into his shoulder. Blood gushed all over Corella's silver chainmail, dyeing it red. The monster had scarlet, evil eyes that withered. However, Corella's blade stopped its row of long and sharp teeth from causing damage. As a knight squire, Corella saved his own life with the most common movement in their training. He thrust the shield on his left hand with all his strength into the rat's stomach. Nothing was scarier than the unknown, so, at least for Lucian, a huge rat showing itself was much better than an adult man disappearing all of a sudden for no reason. Lucian took a deep breath and swung his sword of light at the huge rat to help Corella. At that moment, a bestial roar came from behind Lucian. Gary, when Lucian was about to turn, a knight's saber hacked at his back. The white light of the shield trembled and dimmed a bit. The huge impact pushed Lucian several steps forward, and he almost lost his balance. However, the attack didn't stop there. The saber was chasing Lucian and continuously tried to hurt him. Lucian did his best to dodge it, while having no time to fight back or use his badge. He felt confused and surprised. Why? Gary? Lucian could not see clearly in the darkness. If it was not Gary, then there was only one possibility. Gary was already dead. With good timing, the saber gave Lucian no chance to find his balance, and soon he was pushed into the corner. Lucian was surprised that with the protection of the shield, he did not get injured from the attacks at all. He took a deep breath and tried to calm down, getting ready for the next attack. Then, he dodged the saber's assault by throwing himself on the ground. At the same time, his left hand grabbed the badge. This time, Lucian finally saw who was attacking him. It was the group's leader, Gary. Nevertheless, the muscles on his face were contorted, and his eyes were shining with scarlet light. He looked like an insane beast. The poison from the rats. The poison could deprive humans' consciousness and turn them into bloodthirsty beasts. Lucian tried to understand, but why haven't I been affected? Without further thinking, Lucian rubbed the badge and started chanting. A round iron shield launched a hard whack on Lucian's shield of light. Although the shield did not break, the violent impact suffocated Lucian for a second, interrupting his casting. The continuous whacking prevented Lucian from concentrating. As a promising knight squire, Gary received formal training to interrupt spellcasting. A layman like Lucian, with no basic training, would be unable to resist the disturbances from a knight squire. Any trainee pastor or sorcerer apprentice, with a level 1 Saint Truth badge and a shield of light, could have killed Gary. In the same level, a spellcaster was always superior. While Lucian was being trapped with Gary, Corella could not hold the rat back much longer. His right hand was trembling from the effort of holding the enemy's mouth away. Fortunately, the huge humanoid rat also became weaker. Unable to cast the spell, Lucian changed his mind and swung his sword of light upwards. He knew that his summoned sword was much stronger than the guard's saber. Although the swing did not strike true, the radiance from the sword terrified Gary. He stopped attacking Lucian's shield and switched to a defensive position hurriedly. It seemed like he didn't want to be further apart from Lucian. For a traditional knight, letting his enemy successfully cast a spell would be very dangerous. Without any sound of impact, the sword cut Gary's saber as if it was a piece of wood. Gary barely managed to raise his shield in time and block with it, but the sword left a deep crack right in the middle of the shield. When Lucian was about to launch his next attack, the sword of light suddenly turned into thousands of shining pieces, indicating the spell used up all its power. Actually, its power started decreasing at the very beginning, when it destroyed the magic wall concealing the chamber. Lucian was unable to react for a moment, and Gary seized the chance, smashing Lucian's protection with his shield. Now, Lucian's sword and shield were both gone. Having no time to hesitate, Lucian rubbed the badge desperately to cast his last spell. Ow! Before Lucian could spell out the rest of the chant, Gary punched his stomach. Like a cooked shrimp, Lucian cowered in great pain. A wave of strong acid, rising from his stomach, burned his throat. Gary reached out his hand and squeezed Lucian's neck, choking him. Lucian struggled fiercely and used his right hand to try to free his neck. He felt great pain in his neck and lungs, and his eyes were turning black. The badge in his left hand was being held firmly to his chest by Gary's other hand. Lucian could hear his own gasp. He could feel the cold metal glove Gary was wearing. It felt like Lucian's soul had left his body and was observing from the side. n/o/vel/b/and.c//om. Suddenly, Lucian's will to survive erupted. His soul power increased dramatically all of a sudden and broke through a certain limit, spreading like water from an ocean. At the same time, Gary's strength started disappearing. Lucian got a precious chance to breathe. Learning from his past mistakes, this time Lucian did not waste any time being hesitant or confused. He tried to focus and grab the badge again. As soon as he touched it, Lucian's spirit suddenly entered into an illusionary world of light, where many lines, circles, and triangles formed a weird-looking cross in the air. Lucian recognized the cross instantly. It was the cross on Benjamin's badge, and he could feel that Benjamin's power was continuously coming out of the cross. Out of curiosity, Lucian moved closer and tried to touch it. The cross suddenly trembled and started accumulating power. Soon he felt its power became overwhelming. Feeling the danger, Lucian hurriedly tried to retrieve his spirit back to the real world, but it was too late. A white beam of light shot out from the cross and burned his spirit on the side. A strong, nauseous feeling hit him. Lucian felt like his head was splitting, and two streams of cool, rusty metal-smelling liquid came down from his nose. Suddenly, the light beam somehow materialized and burst out from the badge that Lucian was wearing. Gary did not have a slight of chance to withdraw his hand. Starting from the hand squeezing Lucian's neck, the light beam quickly dissolved his arm and part of his shoulder in seconds like some kind of super strong corroding acid. There was no blood coming out, and the wounds instantly turned black. Divine power can be activated without any spell? This surprised Lucian. He quickly dodged to avoid the enemy's following attack. However, he felt all his muscles aching, and it was hard to move. Then what Lucian saw shocked him greatly. Gary was lying on the ground, dying, with his eyes half open, and the scarlet light on them was gone. The pool of blood left by the dead rats had evaporated, forming a red mist and pervading the chamber and nearby pipes. The weird, human-shaped plant in the corner was stretching its branches cozily in the blood mist. On the other side lied Corella and Hausen, with their own sabers stabbing each other's back. Surrounded by the red mist, Lucian felt his limbs melting, and the nerves in his brain swelling and jerking. In his eyes, Corella and Hausen changed from human bodies to giant rats and continued switching back and forth. It's an illusion? Lucian was quite sure. So he concentrated and spread his spirit again like waves. Then, everything became stable. No changes or contortion happened. Lucian saw Corella and Hausen lying on the ground, with wounds all over their bodies, dying. This is a well-designed magic trap. Did the illusion originate from the blood of the rats, or the peculiar plant? Lucian thought to himself. He finally understood that from the very beginning, when they killed the first rat, they were already trapped in the illusion. Lucian was protected by the light shield, and his spiritual power was a little bit stronger than common people, so he was unaffected by the illusion. The holy strike that shot out of the badge not only evaporated Gary's right hand and shoulder, but also the stone ceiling of the chamber. There was a wide hole there, from which chunks of stone were falling like rain, as if the chamber would cave in at any time. Dust and small stones dispersed the red mist. Lucian felt his strength gradually recovering. Having no idea what would happen next, his brain started quickly functioning again. Except for 2 more light spells, Lucian got nothing useful left, and his muscles were still weak from the paralyzing red mist. Then his attention was drawn to the plant in the corner, which was shaking and wobbling due to the falling stones. The plant cannot protect itself aside from creating an illusion, Lucian wondered. He tried his best to stand up again and then dragged his body towards the plant. He moved very slowly and faltered several times. Sharp stones kept falling on him, leaving painful wounds all over his body. Lucian took a deep breath and kept moving. After so much experience, he became calm and decisive. Reaching out his right hand, he firmly grabbed the main stem of the plant. The plant had a pulse like that of a living being. Lucian felt like he was grabbing veins of a creature, beating with blood. He pulled the stem with all his strength. Suddenly, the plant shrank and burst out an extremely bitter and sharp scream. Lucian did not succeed on his first try, so he kept twisting it with all his strength. Like a dying man struggling for survival, the plant screamed, stretched out its branches, and entangled them around Lucian's arm. The plant was moist, slimy, and cold, and its tentacles had countless tiny burrs which kept burying themselves into Lucian's skin. Fighting back his fear, Lucian pulled hard again. Crack! The plant suddenly stopped screaming. Red liquid spurted out of it and spattered all over Lucian's chest, leaving a strong bloody smell in the air. Feeling limp, Lucian hurriedly leaned against the wall to maintain his balance. After the plant was snapped in half, the red mist became much denser and almost turned into liquid. As soon as the blood mist from the plant reached the 3 books on the desk, they instantly started corroding. It only took a couple of seconds to completely corrode all the books. Lucien didn't get any time to read anything. It must be another magic trap, Lucien thought. In case the chamber got discovered, these sorcerers' notes would destroy themselves automatically when the mist reached a certain density. Arcs! It was such a pity for Lucien. He was hoping to find some mighty magic spells in the notes. Just then, he noticed something shining in his spirit library. Out of curiosity, Lucien let his spirit enter the library. Then his eyes opened wide with great surprise. A new bookshelf appeared, and there was a small tag which read Magic Arcana. Under the tag, there were 3 books. They were the same ones which got destroyed. The library can collect books as well? Wait, what about the content then? I didn't have a chance to read them at all. Lucien was trying to understand how the library worked. As the corrosion happened really fast, the whole books were still destroyed page after page. Probably the library can copy the content. Then the projections of the books can be stored here. Lucien was just guessing. He needed more proof. Staring at the 3 labels, a strong, hesitant feeling rose in Lucien's mind. Wouldn't it be too dangerous to learn magic in a world where divine power dominated everything and sorcerers were hated by the public? Lucien knew he could not waste too much time down here. What was more surprising was that after the mist completely disappeared, both Corella and Housen twitched a little bit. They were still alive. Lucien knew that he really had to hurry up and get all of them out of this terrible place. Benjamin suddenly groaned when he felt Lucien activated Holy Strike. At that moment, their spirits were somehow connected. He was more than surprised. Lord Benjamin? Paul asked with concern. NOVLB //JNN. Under the silver moon, Benjamin's face did not look well. He said in a low voice, "Something unexpected happened down there. Damn it, she was just an apprentice. These guys are useless. Paul, you wait here. If I don't come back in 5 minutes, ask the bishop for help." Because there was a spirit imprint on the badge, Benjamin could feel it. Or he would not have lent the badge to a young guy he had just met. He did not expect that his own imprint could be activated by someone else. Misfortune always comes with arrogance and prejudice. For Benjamin, knights were just a bunch of vulgar and ignorant guys who knew nothing more than how to fight with just their physical strength. So, without giving any thought to whether the guards were actually more suitable, Benjamin directly gave the badge to Lucien, a young boy whose spirit was stronger than common people. Benjamin's perspective came from his past experiences. The family he came from, the Rafati family, was one of the most powerful families in the Duchy of Orvret. Rafati family was known for producing gifted divines. While knights had to learn spells, Benjamin was no way close to being the most talented child in his family. But after entering the monastery, he stood out among his peers and soon became a formal pastor and a divine caster. But now, as a formal pastor, he was having trouble dealing with a trap left behind by a sorcerer's apprentice. It would definitely affect his reputation and position in the church. So he had no choice but to rush over there and solve the trouble himself. Paul was surprised as well. They had the badge. Is there a real sorcerer present there? Sounds of footsteps came when Lucien was about to drag himself out the chamber to ask for help. He became anxious, for fear that if it was another witch or wizard who came, then he would not be able to safely escape with his life again. Above all, he felt worried, because a chamber was one of the best places to execute somebody, and thus keep their mouths shut. Lapland Bloodvine? Benjamin took a glimpse at the corner, and quickly speculated what happened. He looked at Lucien and the 3 guards. Fortunately, they're still alive. Benjamin was a little bit surprised when he saw Lucien. Benjamin thought, it seems like when he activated my imprint, his spirit power also increased. He has reached the basic level of a trainee pastor. Quite lucky. However, everything has changed. The church now is not in its absolute dominant status like 300 years ago. Today, divinity power can't be acquired with talent alone. Being a real pastor requires systematic learning from a young age. The Emperor of Magical Arcana. It was he who started the close to 400-year golden age of the development of divinity power and magic. He changed the rule of how to become a divine caster. As a member of Rafati family, compared with most pastors, Benjamin knew more about the circumstances of the world. What's more, he was not that devoted to his own particular faith. More accurately, being an aristocrat actually conflicted with his identity of belonging to the church. Even further, after the highest theology conference more than 300 years ago, the church was partitioned into two, one south, the other north. They both criticized each other for being a hearsay, but neither of them were ever interrupted or prevented from continuously gaining the divine power, which made many bishops and cardinals doubt whether God really existed, or if all this was a test for God's followers. This kind of attitude directly affected the following younger generations, like Benjamin, for hundreds of years. Besides, to fit into this fast-developing era, several popes had introduced part of the knowledge gained through the exploration of the world by great arcanists to modify the foundation of theology. The adjustment guaranteed the fast development of divinity and the emergence of countless great spellcasters. Therefore, the South Church could still preserve its predominant position in general and keep growing while being surrounded by many powerful enemies like heretics, evil sorcerers, dark creatures, and so on. But at the same time, this behavior additionally prompted more conflicts within the South Church itself. Benjamin's thought came back to reality. He released some white powder from his hand and chanted some weird spell. A strong wind blew the red mist away. He pointed his finger towards Gary. A white light fell down on his wound. The wound started healing and soon regained its original color. After curing Corella, Housen, and Lucian one by one, he confirmed with them what happened. Benjamin checked the desk to ensure nothing was left there. Move all the stuff back to the church, including the bodies of the rats. He put the badge, which had already been returned by Lucian, back on his neck and said, God has forgiven you. Go back and rest. May God bless you. Initially, Benjamin wanted to reward Lucian with some money or even wait to see whether the kid had the potential to be further trained if things went well. But after all of this, the only thing Benjamin wanted was Lucian to leave as soon as possible. He got another problem to face, Gary's right hand. He did not master the spell for limb regeneration. Having the chance to leave, Lucian hurriedly walked towards the exit. By the moment he left the chamber, he heard Corella talking to Housen in a low voice. Gary lost his right hand. He probably can't stay in the guards anymore. He walked outside the pipes with complicated, mixed feelings. The crowd mobbed him instantly with great concerns. Little Evans, is the ghost gone now? Auntie Elisa asked loudly from far off. Lucian nodded, yes. The place has been purified by the pastor and the guards. The mood lightened immediately after they got Lucian's certain answer. They started being more curious about what happened down there. Lucian, what did the ghost look like? Terrifying? I knew Lord Benjamin could handle it. Lucian is blessed by God. He got the chance to use the badge. What a pity. Lucian is not a child anymore, or he would be able to go to the monastery and become a real pastor. Think about it. A pastor from Audiobook. Lucian was bothered by the comments. I'm too old to be a pastor already? Although Lucian himself never thought about being a pastor because of his identity, it was still quite depressing knowing he was completely hopeless after seeing such an amazing power. My poor little Evans. Look at your face. You must be very exhausted, Auntie Elisa asked. Lucian really needed some time for himself. He nodded and walked directly towards his small shanty. He closed the door and sat down on the bed. He could hear the crowd gradually dispersing after Benjamin, and the guards left. Lucian missed his parents and friends, but could not do anything about it. He started thinking about his own future again. The real Lucian did not get any training before, so I could neither become a pastor nor a knight. If I want to get rid of this life and become someone, then I need to learn magic. But then I would be an enemy of the church and all the people, including Auntie Elisa. Do I have other choices? Finally, Lucian decided to first look at the notes in his mental library. A little while later, Lucian talked to himself. The notes were full of strange characters. And Evans, as a poor child, was uneducated and illiterate. As a hopeless illiterate, Lucian could only helplessly stare at the notes and yearn for the amazing power. Although he had experienced a lot here, he still felt extremely depressed with the gap. He was a university student in another world, but now he was just a poor guy who couldn't even read. Lucian made up his mind. He must learn how to read. Even if Lucien could not be a pastor, learning how to read and write was not a bad thing in order to get rid of poverty. He had no physical strength. If there was a way out for Lucien, it would be something related to knowledge. Feeling motivated by his decision, Lucien again picked up the notes, hoping to uncover any other hidden secret. There were many strange but familiar patterns in the notes, like lines and geometric figures. Lucien guessed they were probably magic seals or circles because he saw them in the badge before. Then, he saw some formulas which might be used to make magic potions. The characters in the second note were even more complicated. Actually, the two notes were of different characters. Fortunately, the third one looked more interesting and contained the same character as the second one. It was filled with assorted hand-produced figures like plants, minerals, and creatures. After a new round of searching, he still couldn't find anything useful. Lucien stopped thinking and tried to fall asleep. He strongly desired to change his life. So, he could not let his messy concerns and worries disturb himself. From tomorrow onwards, he must fight for his own life. Lucien fell asleep quickly after the intense fight. Meanwhile, in the dark sewers, a black rat with scarlet and cold eyes was moving around the ruins and quickly went in another direction. After a while, the rat found a hidden hole and disappeared. In the early morning, sounds of people speaking with bucket clapping broke the silence. The street was already livened up. Lucien, who used to hate getting out of bed in the morning, forced himself to get up as soon as he woke up. He lighted the stove and boiled some hot water. While nibbling his last loaf of brown bread, which felt like chewing a piece of wood, Lucien started planning his day. This world was still unfamiliar to Lucien. Thus his plan was difficult to accomplish. He first decided to find a job to feed himself before learning how to read. I gotta be careful. Cannot let anyone notice. Lucien talked to himself. Before he left, Lucien grabbed his 7 coins to feel a little bit more secure. He locked the door and went directly to Auntie Elisa's place, who was the only one he knew there. "Morning, Lucien." A girl with black hair greeted him on the streets, filled with curiosity. Lucien did not know her. Hurriedly, he made a smile and replied, "Hey, I'm going to visit Auntie Elisa. Sorry, but I'm running late." And then he quickly passed her by. "Hi, Lucien. Did you really face the ghost? How did you feel when you cast the spell? I heard a guard lost his right arm. It was very dangerous last night, wasn't it?" It seemed that Lucien had become famous in the district overnight. Within 3 minutes walking, a few neighbors came and asked about his adventure. Lucien knew none of them. He could only smile and head towards his destination. Before Lucien knocked the door, he heard a familiar voice. "Little Evans. Good morning." Joel was walking towards him. "Good morning, Uncle Joel." It was such a relief for Lucien. Dressing neatly, Joel was holding a classic harp. "Did you have breakfast? Don't be in a rush to find a work until you're fully recovered. You can always eat here." "Don't worry." Lucien appreciated his kindness so much. He started feeling he was not alone here. "Thank you, Uncle Joel, but I had my breakfast already. And I got blessed by Pastor Benjamin last night. So, now I'm completely fine." Joel nodded and walked with Lucien side by side. "Later you could go and find Cone at Copper Coronet. He still owes me a bottle of less wine. He will introduce a good job for you." Then he turned his face towards Lucien and said in a serious voice, "Evans, you're already 17. It's time you started thinking about your future." "Uncle Joel?" Lucien knew he was saying the truth. Joel sighed slightly. "No one can make a living with only doing labor all the time. You know it. I've seen a few old labor guys with no saving and no children to rely on in their last days. All of them died in their 50s or even 40s. He paused a little bit and continued. "I know learning will take a long time, but if you're willing to work hard, you can always support yourself with a skill." During their conversation, they walked through a gate where 2 guards were standing on both sides. Lucien's eyes suddenly lit up. Broad and clean streets, busy stores, and pedestrians wearing colorful and fancy clothes. Music was wafting in the soft wind. It was a different world compared with the poor Audieron district. Lucien thanked Joel sincerely. n/o/vel/b/in.c//om. Joel started joking again. "Besides, sometimes a master only has a single daughter. Who knows? Maybe you can be promoted directly from an apprentice to the future owner. You know, a nice-looking, promising young fellow is always in demand. Lucien replied with an awkward smile. Joel finally stopped around a corner. He placed a hat on the ground and got ready to play his harp. Lucien was a little bit surprised to find that Uncle Joel was a street artist. Joel pointed to the luxurious and magnificent palace in the distance and smiled. That is the Hall of Chant. For me, I feel like I'm playing music in the hall. Before Lucien said anything, Joel continued murmuring as if something inside of his heart was triggered. 400 years ago, guided by the Holy Hiles Empire, the church marched towards the west. Finally, they occupied the last central city of the old Sylvanus magic empire, Alto. The army drove the dark creatures and demons away into the dark mountain range. Since then, Alto has always been one of the most famous cities across the whole continent. 300 years ago, under the guidance of the Pope Charles I, who was still a cardinal at that time, lots of famous scholars and artists studied and edited together the hymns and poems of past ages. After he became the Pope, he promoted the singing style in every church and started regular choirs. Since then, Alto has been enjoying the reputation of City of Psalms. Because we are close to the Dark Mountain Range, elves, dwarves, and dog-headed men, or say, cynocephaly, often came in contact with us, and some even became members of our duchy. Different kinds of music were mixed in Alto, and the polyphonic music was born here. Then followed formal symphony, gussu, violin, etc. Countless artists and musicians inscribed their names on the pages of history. Playing inside the Hall of Chant is a great honor for every musician and bard. Although I cannot get in there, it's also a pleasure for me to play my harp here. After parting from Joel, Lucien took Joel's suggestion and started heading towards Copper Coronet. While asking the way, he was enjoying the wonderful music in the wind. As soon as he returned back to Audiobook, he saw a busy pub with a cornet board hanging there. Outside of the pub, from time to time, young girls and women could come and glance into it. And then it was interesting and confusing for Lucien. The morning was obviously not busy hours for a pub. A slender blonde girl was peeking inside from the pub door. Then, she sighed and was about to leave, but was surprised to notice Lucien standing there, waiting for her to get out of the way. "Oh, Lucien!" she exclaimed. Lucien was already used to the situation. He smiled and greeted, "Morning. What are you doing here?" The girl's tan cheeks suddenly flushed. I'm just on my way. I heard there's a new bard here today in the pub. So anyway, I gotta go, Lucien." Before Lucien said his goodbye, the young girl rushed away with her cheeks red. Lucien guessed the bard she mentioned should be very attractive. However, it had nothing to do with Lucien. He was here to work. He gently pushed the door and stepped inside the pub. Lucien's first impression towards the pub was not very good. A dusky space, with a strong alcohol smell and messy tables and chairs. It took his eye a while to get accustomed to the dark environment. Several drunkards were woken by the noise. They emitted a few curses and went back to sleep on the tables. There was an hook-nosed man in a tight black coat, probably in his 30s, sitting on a bar stool and was sipping his amber-colored wine. Without saying anything, he glimpsed at Lucien. Lucien looked around. Soon, he found a dwarf snoring loudly behind the counter. He was sitting on a high bar chair with his round head leaning against the wall. His shining saliva was dropping on his blonde beard, which was tied into a bow. Knowing the dwarf would not wake up by himself, Lucien knocked on the counter loudly with his fingers. The drunkard started swearing in the background. The old dwarf slowly woke up with sleepy eyes. "Oh my, Lucien. Finally, you're a grown-up now. Finally, you understand the wonderfulness of wine. Cheers for our new customer. It's already morning, Uncle Cone." Lucien was hesitant about how to call the pub owner. Cone rubbed his eyes and looked around. "I'm not drunk. Don't lie to me. What a wonderful night." After quite a while, Cone finally sobered up. When Lucien asked about the jobs, Cone made a slightly pained look and said, I don't have really good ones now. All I got are some odd jobs. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Let me see. 3 fells for carrying stuff from the grocery to the gate zone. But you have to give 1 fell to the gangsters there at the end of the day. Then, all you can get from the work is 2 fells. only enough for buying an old brown bread. Another thing, yes, here, the Musician Association's going to do a cleaning today. You can rent a cart and help them with the garbage. You can get 8 fells after the rent. But also, 3 fells to the bastards. There is something else too? No, I don't think you're qualified for that. Lucian nodded. He only had 7 fells with himself. He did not really have many choices. Working for the association was the best one. Cone, do you have jobs with better payment? Lucian asked again with curiosity. Cone laughed loudly. Yes, for sure, my boy. But those are for real men, as they require strength and courage, not for a young boy. You don't even know how to drink. Then he lowered his voice. I've seen so many people setting off towards the dark mountain range from my bar. They were mercenaries and experienced adventurers. But very, very few of them came back alive. Cone belched and continued. Of course, they all made a big fortune, though. Don't underestimate them. Many of them were high-level knights. A gentle but attractive voice came from behind Lucian. His tone was lifted slightly in the end, sounding elegant and seductive. Lucian turned around and saw a silver-haired man walking towards them from one of the pub's rooms. He was wearing slim pants and a red jacket, covered with a black high-collared coat. Those formal clothes looked amazingly casual but elegant on him. He had quite refined features. Silver eyes, tall and straight nose, thin lips. The man almost looked like a charming elf with his silky silver hair, like a full moon at night. Holding a harp in his hand, the man picked a bar chair and sat down. Hey, Ryan, want a drink? Cone grabbed. Thanks, but I only drink at night. He smiled. Peace has been prevailing on the continent for almost 300 years. There are more nights than people need. The Duchy of Orverit, the closest duchy to the Dark Mountain Range, is full of myths and mysterious treasures. Many new and honored knights come here to seek credits, honor, and fortune. He fiddled with the harp and continued. Besides, some of them were broken knights, some of them were convicted, some of them were travelers, while some of them were dark knights who were not admitted by the church. Cone was a little bit unhappy with Rhine's rejection. He murmured, Lucian, this is Rhine Carendia. As a bard, he traveled a lot, and he just got away from the passionate trio ladies in the kingdom of Syracuse. The kingdom of Syracuse? Lucian asked. Cone burst out laughing. His long, blonde beard swayed with his laughter. With an ambiguous smile on his wrinkled face, he replied, Yes, the Syracuse. A passionate, romantic nation where love is the top priority. A drunkard joined them when they started talking about Syracuse. He loudly burped and asked with eagerness, Rhine, the ladies and madams, they're there in Tria, were they really that beautiful and hot? Rhine smiled casually and answered with his unique tone, Yes, they were. Their eyes were like morning stars, hair like silk, lips like roses, and their fair skin like milk. I can still remember the perfumes they wore and their wet, warm breaths. A few ladies and duchess even invited me to their secret manners. The drunkard cut in with excitement. Did you go then? Lucian knew the most common topic within men was women. While he was listening, he was also thinking about his learning how to read. Rhine, with the same smile, answered, I told them I did not like dirty things that had been used by someone else. I love beautiful, clean, and pure lives, no matter men or women. They're the tastiest things in the world. Bullshit, Rhine. There was no way you dare to speak to them like that. Right, if you had answered like this, you would be in the famous jail in Tria by now. Come on, Rhine. Those ladies, many of them could compete with the knights. Dare you? Rhine shrugged his shoulders, slightly facing Cone and the drunkard's laughter. That's why I'm here now, not in Syracuse. Pounding the counter, Cone was laughing so hard that he almost got choked. Drunkards there were all wakened up by his pounding, looking angry but confused. Such a good story from our beloved Rhine. Cone's face turned red. Cheers. For the wonderful story. All the drunkards knew was ale. They pushed their ways to the counter to grab the free drink. Cheers for Rhine the blowhard. The blowhard. They laughed and shouted. A while later, when the pub finally quieted down again, Cone was very surprised to find that Lucian was still there. What else? My boy? Cone asked. Yes, I've got a new idea. I'm thinking about learning how to read. Read? Now Cohn was even more surprised. You talk with Ryan? You two are dreamers. Several guys in the bar started heckling. Whoa, what a magnificent, glorious dream for our brave little pauper. While some showed their support, Lucian, good for you. Dreams make a real man. Cohn laughed with him for a while and then turned to Lucian. 2 years, Lucian. It'll take you at least 2 years to learn how to read. You'll start from scratch. Do you have any idea how much money and effort it will cost you? Lucian looked into his eye, nodded firmly. I understand. So many people tell me I'm too old for this or that. But Cohn, as people said, better late than never. If I don't make up my mind, there will never be a start. As a university student in his original world, Lucian was confident that, with all the knowledge he mastered before, he would be able to understand the language rules and start reading very soon. Twirling his big beard, Cohn nodded. I see. You're too old to enter the church school. That's for sure. Then, there are 2 ways. Either you become an apprentice for 10 years, or you pay for a teacher. But the first way, it depends on whose apprentice you want to be. I don't see the necessity for a blacksmith to learn reading. They won't pay you for that. If you can afford a teacher, it will be 5 nars a month. 5 silver coins. And the price is same in the whole city. Lucian did not want to become an apprentice. 10 years was too long, but he also had to make sure no one would possibly find out that he was trying to learn magic. Being an apprentice meant he had to live in his master's place. That would not be good. 5 nars. It's probably going to take you half year to save 5 nars if you work from day to night and eat the cheapest brown bread. NOVLB //JNN. And how much can you learn within a month? Cohn added, Are you still going? Lucian answered firmly, Yes, I am. 100 fells equaled to 1 NAR. It was a tough start, but still possible. Lucian had read many novels about how to make big fortunes from scratch. Sadly, none would be helpful for him. 7 fells were insufficient to start anything. While the morning sun was shining on the market, Lucian was already carrying a heavy bag of goods towards the gate. No matter what great dreams a person got, survival always ranked first. Beads of sweat poured down from his face. His linen clothes were all wet. What's worse, the fat guy called Gutche kept nagging from the side. Damn, a child? Watch out. Don't ruin my stuff. He wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. Or you could just pay more to find someone else. Lucian fought back in his mind. At the same time, he was also glad that he could earn 1 more fell by doing all the work by himself. Finally, they reached the gate. Lucian laid the goods safely on the cart. Gutche reluctantly pulled out his purse and gave 4 fells to Lucian. He then paused and said, Young lad, you did a good job. The work will be yours next time as well. Lucian did all the work alone for a much lower price. No wonder, Gutche now forgot all his complaints. As soon as Lucian got his pay, 2 hooligan-looking guys approached them. We work for Aaron. I'm Andre. The brown-haired man identified himself. He had a scar on his face. Lucian was already prepared for this. He handed him a fell. The other guy just stared at Lucian and said, 2. Lucian blurted out, but it should be 1. Everyone gives 1. He knew that he was in no position to argue, but he just could not stand being robbed like this. Usually, Gutche hires 2 people, so we charge 1 fell for each person. We charge you double cost. You did all the work alone. I don't see any problem here. Andre smiled like he was a decent businessman. A second later, Lucian lowered his head and passed the strong guy another fell. Lucian did not want to offend these gangsters. Smart boy. You know the rule. Some young lads, they love challenging us. But you see, we're still here. Well, some of them are at the bottom of the Belem River. All right, Mag. Let's go. Andre threatened him like it was usual and left. Of course, Lucian hated this. He was already prepared for this, but still could not control himself. He understood that either high status or strength could help him get rid of all the suffering. I wish there were some magic potions in the notes that would help to improve my strength. Then Lucian tried his best to stop thinking. He knew that it was a dangerous sign. A sign that he was getting tempted to learn magic. Almost everyone in the city knew the unique design building of the Musicians' Association. Very quickly, Lucien found the place called Sparkling Flame. Assembled with lines, small towers, flying buttresses, stained glasses, and flame-shaped window lattices, the whole five-floored building held a particular unsymmetrical and flamboyant beauty. A skinny middle-aged man with a mustache hurriedly came down from the stairs. "You're late. I told you 1 o'clock." This man was George. Cohn had already introduced him to Lucien. George worked for the association, and it seemed like he knew quite a few guys there. "George, there are still 10 minutes before the appointed time." Lucien pointed to the Golden Bell Tower in the wealthy neighborhood, whose minute hand still had some way to go from number 12. Waving his hands, George complained to Lucien. "The cleaners finished their job earlier. You gotta remove the rubbish piling up in the back as soon as possible. I don't want to piss the musicians off. Some of them still have a performance this afternoon." Lucien left his rented trolley to the guards and walked into the bright and grand hall. Covered with soft and thick carpet, the floor made no noise at all. There were just a few people walking across the cold, quiet hall. Following George, Lucien came to a waist-high counter in the center of the hall, behind which sat a green-eyed and pretty young girl. "Uncle George, is he your helper?" she greeted. While she was talking, she took out a tinkling purse and handed it to George. According to Lucien's estimation, approximately 40 fells were in there. However, after paying the trolley rent, he could only get 8 fells. Holding the purse in his palms, George grinned, showing his yellow teeth, and his eyes narrowed into 2 slits. "He is a good worker, although a bit young." Then he turned to Lucien. "I'll leave your pay with Andre. Just find him after you finish." Lucien nodded. He was not worried that George would keep the money himself. Even though the errand gang was overbearing, they too had to follow the rules. Cohn mentioned before that someone tried to keep some money, and later he had to compensate twice the amount. When Elena was about to find a servant to show Lucien the way to the backyard, a middle-aged man wearing a red, loose coat came in. She hurriedly stood up and bowed slightly. "Good afternoon, Mr. Victor." "Good afternoon, Elena." The man replied politely. He had blue eyes as deep as an ocean. "May I have the latest music criticism?" His voice was deep and rich. Lucien was surprised. He did not expect to find a newspaper in this world, and even specialized ones. What impressed him more was the polarization here, thinking about the fact that many people in Audiobook were still illiterate. Lucien guessed not many people would buy newspapers. He also wondered how much the newspaper cost. Victor roughly went through the pages and gave Elena 10 fells. He then went towards the stairs after nodding politely to both of them, with the newspaper under his arm. After he left, Lucien asked Elena curiously, "The newspaper costs 10 fells?" Having worked in the association for a whole year, Elena was proud that she could share her knowledge with someone who was also from the same poor background like she was before. In the year 426 of St. Calendar, the Cardinal Adelaide enhanced the method for papermaking. Since then, the paper price continued declining. Now you can buy a dozen newspapers with just a couple of fells. But only members of our association can buy music criticism with 10 fells. Others, including nobles, have to pay a silver NAR. Both Music Criticism and Symphony News are the most authoritative music publications across the continent. She then continued, "Every piece of music and article is produced by brilliant musicians and scholars." This month's Music Criticism published the comments from His Majesty and Princess Natasha on the concert held last week in the Psalm Hall, n/o/vel/b//and.c//om. Aside from showing off, Lucien's good-looking face was another reason why she kept offering so much information. NAR? For a moment, an exciting plan of robbing newspapers appeared in his mind. 5 NARs could easily solve Lucien's problem. A second later, he realized the thought was too ridiculous. No one would buy from him. Sure. Happy with Lucien's interaction, Elena kept talking. "You think it's too expensive? In places like Tria, Antefleur, Effi, Tilly's, and Ann Hayter, these newspapers are very popular. People there honor alto's music very much and would even pay 1 gold thael for an old one." Lucien took a glance at the newspapers under the counter while trying hard to resist his impulse. But he also got some information from her words. Under the mighty church, currency across the continent should be unified. Secondly, there was no such spell for teleportation. If there was, it must have very strict rules, or the nobles in other cities would not read old newspapers. More than 10 minutes later, it finally occurred to Elena that Lucien still had work to do. She reluctantly stopped herself and asked a servant to lead him to the backyard garden. Be quiet. Don't talk loud. Don't move loud. In 3 months, Mr. Victor's going to hold his first concert in the Psalm Hall. Recently, he's being pretty, sensitive, Elena kindly reminded him. Lucien nodded to her gratefully and followed the servant towards the garden. A big pile of trash was in the backyard garden. It took Lucien a couple of rounds to throw it away. To keep the city clean, there were people collecting trash every morning. But the fancy association just could not tolerate the trash piling up in their garden for a whole day. After finishing the work, Lucien sneaked into the hall and moved around the margins of the round hall towards the gate. Damn it, Wolf! Can you just leave me alone for 1 second and let me focus on my music? He heard a deep and rich voice which turned sharp in the end. At the same time, a man wearing a red coat rushed down from the stairs. Then he ran right into Lucien. Bang! Something heavy fell down on the carpet, making a dull sound. Victor nearly lost his footing. Taking a deep breath, Victor bent down and picked up a broken lamp which had fallen down from Lucien's pile of trash. Sorry. He gave the lamp he picked up from the carpet back to Lucien. Another brown-haired man wearing dark blue long coat walked down from the stairs. There was a noticeable arch on his chin. Victor, you're not the only musician here. I can do whatever I want. If you have a problem with it, then go back home. The smile on his face became even bigger. I know. There are only 3 months left before your concert. And I understand. I'm so looking forward to it. I'll write an article for you on music criticism, especially for you. Bastard, let's see when you can have your own concert. Swearing in a low voice, Victor turned around and left the hall quickly. The moment Victor turned his back, the smile disappeared from Wolf's face. He walked back while murmuring, "It should be mine." After seeing their argument, Lucien continued carrying the trash to the gate. Then, he saw the broken lamp decorated with fancy patterns, and the bottom of the lamp was made of metal. Dumping the trash into the cart, Lucien picked up the lamp. It felt like copper, but more flexible. It would probably sell for several fells at a smith shop. For a poor guy like Lucien, everything he saw would be related to money. Wait, maybe I can find more useful items like paper or quills in this pile. Now, this pile of trash was a treasure for Lucien. His heart was full of surprise and excitement. Although the rich people would not even bother looking at it, for Lucien, this was his first chance of changing his life. 5 silver nars was sufficient for 1 month's educational cost. Besides, he got an entire library inside his mind which could be constantly expanded. If he was able to learn how to read, he trusted that he would discover better ways for making a fortune. Lucien felt energized just thinking about his future. Feeling excited, he pulled his cart out of the city. But he was also worried. No one liked old things from trash. I just gotta be careful. If Aaron's gang caught wind of this, they're gonna demand more from me. After Lucien's fight in the sewers, his fear for this world and towards gangsters diminished. He knew more about how to fight than they did. After leaving the hall, Lucien saw a silver-haired man walking leisurely towards the association. Ryan? What's he doing here? Lucien did not think much about it. It was not strange for a bard visiting such a reputable place. André was at the gate. He recognized Lucien and saw his fully loaded cart. He just waved his hand and let him leave out of the city. Although excited, Lucien did not easily lower his guard. After a 20-minute walk from the gate, Lucien finally stopped at a quiet place along the Balem River. Rummaging through the trash, Lucien got some useful stuff. A broken lamp, several rusty pieces of metal, 8 worn-out quills, and some bundles of paper, etc. Finally, Lucien pulled out a nice-smelling, damaged black lace. It looked like a veil, which might once belong to a female musician. Without any erotic imagination, all Lucien thought was just about money. It got a fine craft. Maybe I can sell it to a tailor who can probably use this as a decoration. Wrapping that stuff with some paper, Lucien hid them in the grass. Then, he continued pulling his cart downstream to the place where the trash was piled up. He was surprised that the dump site was much smaller than he thought. The river beside it was very clean. No one was there except for Lucien. While smelling the awful stench emitted from trash, Lucien started his rummaging again. In this world, nobody picks up trash for a living. Lucien wondered, maybe they're afraid of catching any disease. However, Lucien's empty purse was clearly more of a threat to him than getting sick, which might or might not happen. Wrapping his hand with waste papers, he found something which was probably worth a few fells. It was his first time, so Lucien was extremely cautious. He hid some of the stuff and went back for his paper parcel. Hiding his findings under a dirty old bag in his cart, Lucien tried to flatten the bag as much as he could to make it look like the cart's cover. Lucien stuffed the small things into his pocket. It was much easier than he thought. The guards just waved their hands and let him in after shooting a glance at him. When Lucien was pulling his cart towards Andre and Mag, he realized why the guards just let him pass easily. Covering their noses, Andre and Mag's eyebrows were twisted together when they saw him. Lucien was happy to see this. He pulled his smelling cart even closer to them and asked, "I'm Lucien. I come for my pay." Mag immediately stepped back and took out the money while swearing. "Damn you! Fuck off with your stinking cart." Andre, with his consistent smile, was standing even further. "Your first time going to the river, isn't it? If you stay there until dark, you may get lucky. Just watch the ghosts there." "Huh?" Without asking about ghosts, Lucien quickly left with his pay to return the cart. He did not want any more trouble. Lucien made 5 fells in total for cleaning up the garbage. However, his findings were more important than them. With them, he could easily earn 5 nars. After returning home, Lucien hurriedly hid the rest of the stuff and then rushed to the market. Lucien took it directly to a tailor without even cleaning the veil. He was rushing with quite a bit of excitement. N/O/vel/b//gin.c///om. However, when Lucien was standing in front of a tailor's shop, he became hesitant. He would probably get scolded or turned out of the door before he could open his mouth. Lucien's face was flushed, like when he tried to do sales at the university. "Don't be a coward, Lucien. Don't feel it's shameful." Lucien started encouraging himself. "What can your dignity do for you now? Can your dignity turn your dark bread into white one? Or can it offer you steak, codfish, and wine? Can dignity teach you reading?" Lucien had experienced quite a bit after coming to this world. He had even wobbled on the borderline of death. He quickly made up his mind and walked into the shop with firm footsteps. An old man wearing glasses was sitting in the shop. Noticing Lucien entering, he asked with confusion, "Yes?" Lucien's dressing obviously showed that he was too poor to even visit an expensive tailor. Smiling with great enthusiasm, Lucien rubbed his hands. "Hello, sir. I got a nice black lace, and I was wondering if you're interested in it." Before Lucien could finish his words, he was cut in by the old man fiercely. "A fine black lace from you? Get lost, you damned thief." He walked out of the counter and pushed Lucien out. "I, old Forau, am a decent tailor. I only buy clothes from the lot, see." Being driven out of the first shop, Lucien had no choice but to find the next one. And he would try, "Get out. We don't need anything from you." It was the 3rd time that Lucien got rejected. These fancy tailors always hated poor guys like Lucien. Even when Lucien showed the lace, they were still not willing to waste a second on him. It was a big market, more than 10 streets that crossed with each other. There were lots of different shops ran by humans, dwarves, and elves. Soon, Lucien found another neat little tailor's shop at the end of a street. Standing behind the counter was a 15 or 16-year-old shy-looking blonde boy. "Hi, I'm Buster. Anything I can help you with?" "Yes, could you take a look at this lace, please?" Lucien placed the veil on the counter. Buster gently rubbed it with his fingers under the light and got surprised. "Sir, it's the Black Nightingale from the Kingdom of Home. Where did you get it?" Like other tailors, Buster knew Lucien could not afford this lace. Sometimes, even rich people might not be able to buy a small piece of Black Nightingale. All noble ladies wanted it. Lucien lowered his voice. "Don't worry. It's clean." "Clean?" A 30-something-year-old man walked out from behind. The thin-faced man was McDowell, the owner of this shop. Lucien was surprised that they did not immediately drive him away, which was a promising signal. Yes, yes, I swear in the name of God. You see, there's a hole in it. It was abandoned by a noble lady, and I just happened to find it. Turn it into a decoration on a dress or a band. I think with your hands, you can definitely make it become eye-catching again, sir. Lucien added eagerly. Taking the lace from Buster's hands, McDowell had a close look. After a moment's thinking, he asked calmly, "How much do you want, then?" Lucien clenched his fists in excitement, but did not dare show it in his face. "Come on, Lucien. You fought with the huge, crazy rats before. Stay calm." Lucien secretly consoled himself. "You offer, sir. I believe your price wouldn't let me down." Lucien smiled and answered. Looking into Lucien's eyes, McDowell paused a little bit. 40 fells. It's not much use to me with a hole in it. ANAR. A fancy dress with a black nightingale on it. Even distinguished ladies and madams will fight for it. Lucien more than doubled the offer. N/O/vel/B//N.C///OM. McDowell shook his head and handed the lace back to Lucien. 50 fells. I cannot go any more than this. I'm sorry, but thank you anyway, sir. Lucien calmly turned around and was ready to leave. Actually, he was very nervous. He was worrying that he might lose his only chance for being greedy. Step by step, Lucien dragged his feet towards the exit. When he was about to leave the shop, McDowell's voice suddenly came from behind. 80 fells. My last offer. I'm only paying this much because the lace is a perfect match for one of my dresses. Great! Lucien waved his fist joyfully, and then he turned around and smiled. Deal, sir. Tinkling coins bulged Lucien's pocket. For Lucien, nothing was more lovely than getting rich. I don't know you, and I don't care either. But if in the future you got some good stuff like this, you could bring it here, as long as it's clean, McDowell added. Sure, sir. Thank you. Lucien slightly bowed and smiled. After stepping out of the shop, Lucien found the sunshine was very brilliant under the amazingly blue sky. Breathing the fresher-than-ever air, Lucien found this world was kind of lovely as well. 80 fells was pretty decent for him. For Lucien, he found his idea of collecting money actually worked. This was even more important to him. Ivan was waiting for Lucien near his home. He waved his hand as soon as he saw Lucien coming. Lucien, there you are. My mom sent me to invite you for dinner. My brother's home. John? Ivan's elder brother? Lucien tried to recall. John's, yes, night squire in training. It was not really safe for him to carry so much money everywhere with him. Just a moment, Ivan. I gotta wipe my sweat a bit. Lucien smiled. Sure, Lucien. Ivan looked more excited than usual. You know what? John brought a piece of beef from Lord Vin. We're gonna have beef stew tonight. His little dirty face was full of excitement and expectancy. I haven't had... Actually, little Ivan's family was not as poor as most people living in Odd Aeron. As a busker, Joel's income could vary sometimes, but it was still better than Labor's. Elisa worked as a laundry maid as well, but they were always saving for John's training back in the days. Old Evans, Lucien's father, helped them quite a lot before. After hiding the money safely, Lucien quickly washed his face and followed Ivan towards Aunt Elisa's place. A bunch of neighbors were gathered in front of the cabin. Little John's now the sworn night squire following Lord Vin, isn't he? Yes, Elisa told me herself. Little John's not even 19 yet. One day he might get lucky and awaken the endowed blessing in his blood. Then he's going to be a real knight. Then no more Little John. We shall say, Lord John. John can also be the commander of the city guard as a sworn night squire now. Joel and Elisa are so lucky. They must be very proud of their son. Ivan was nodding with great pride. As they entered the living room, a blond young man stood up from the chair. Inheriting his father's look, John was a handsome young lad, tall and straight. His elegant gesture was quite impressive to Lucien. I was quite worried hearing what happened to you, Lucien. John patted Lucien's shoulder and smiled. Glad to see. You're all right now. I guess it was a test for you from God. Although he was just 1 or 2 years older than Lucien, John appeared much more mature. His gray knight attire also made him quite out of the ordinary. Thanks, John. It was not a big deal, really. Auntie Elisa always worries about me. Lucien nodded. When they sat down around the dinner table, John laid his hand on Lucien's shoulder. Why do I feel strangeness between us? Come on, we are best friends. I guess you changed quite a bit since you left home. Lucien was a little bit nervous. John nodded seriously. Yeah, I'd say so. Training there changed me a lot, both physically and mentally. It was very hard, but I gained a lot from it as well. Dinner was not a feast. They only got beef stew and roasted fish on the table. But for Lucien, this dinner was beyond delicious. He devoured his serve and even bit his tongue a few times. The happy reunion was so sweet that Joel even got a rare chance to enjoy his beef with ale. Elisa talked even more during the dinner. Most of the time, she was the only one who kept talking all the way. A couple of words from Joel, Lucien, or Ivan were enough to keep her going. According to the rules of a night, John did not talk very much. I'm stuffed. The happy dinner ended with little Ivan's loud burp. John smiled and shook his head. Ivan, eating too much is bad for you. Then, he turned to Lucien. Have you got any future plan? He asked. Carefully arranging his words, Lucien nodded. Yeah, it was still unclear, but I don't want to live a life like what I'm doing now. Good. John looked into his eyes. Lord Venn told us, being unsatisfied with your life pushes you to move forward. The bakery and the cellar in Lord Venn's manor are now looking for apprentices. It's a pretty good chance, but you got to work there for 10 years. If you're interested in this job, just tell me by next Monday. People in this world also believed in the myth that God created everything in 7 days. They also attended church every single Sunday. Being a night squire was very promising. Now, John was able to help his family and friends. Although the help could not change their lives completely, it was still of great importance. Thank you, John. Honestly, Lucien was still reluctant to constrain himself in the following 10 years, especially when he had just made his first small fortune. But he still wanted to think for some time before making a decision. All right, I gotta go back now. John stood up from his chair and hugged his family. And he gave Lucien a big hug. I wish you could read, Lucien. Downey is looking for a clerk for the court. It's a very decent job with nice payment. I'm planning to start studying. Lucien seized the chance and told John. John was quite surprised. Soon, he smiled and nodded. I'll see if there's any chance for you. Lucien thanked John again, sincerely. But he also did not place all his hope on John. He had to work on his own. For the following 3 days, Lucien did not find anything valuable like the Black Nightingale. But he still managed to save a NAR and 64 fells. Now, he was walking towards the city gate as usual with great confidence. Looking at Lucien's back, Andre nudged Mag a bit. Why does he leave the city every morning? Leave the city? An amiable voice came from behind them. Andre hurriedly turned around, looking serious. Morning, Jackson. Jackson Riotors, one of the leaders of the Aaron gang, had a kind face. But his craftiness and treacherousness could definitely place him at the top of the group. Holding his chin, Jackson put on a kind smile. Morning, Andre. What's going on here? Not a big deal, Jackson. Andre responded in a flattering way. A guy is recently going outside of the city every day. I was just wondering. Interesting. Does he carry anything with him? Somehow Jackson's smile was kind of frightening, which for a moment gave both Andre and Mag goosebumps. Mag believed in both the God of Truth and his own fists, and claimed that he carried 1/16 of the savage blood from the Aaron Highland. However, his brain did not work as fast as his fists. Jackson's question was too demanding for him. I remember he always carries an old sack. Sometimes he comes back with something in it. There are many mushrooms near the Belem River. No, not mushrooms. Jackson cut in. Then what else could a poor guy like him do? Andre asked nervously. Facing the Belem River and the Melzer Black Forest, the gate that Andre and Mag were watching was the busiest one among the 3 gates of Alto. Countless merchants, adventurers, and plain folks came back and forth every day. They never bothered paying extra attention to a poor boy like Lucien. Jackson came for a reason. The blacksmith Rigo came to me 2 days ago. A young lad sold him a nice piece of orichalcum. Oricha? Orichalcum, or say mountain copper. Only wealthy nobles can afford it. Although the one he got was of the lowest quality, it was still quite enough to forge a fine dagger. Rigo wanted to find more, so he came to me. Lucien sold that? Mag asked directly. Jackson slightly nodded. He was careful. The metal was polished, so Rigo couldn't find any clues. It took me a whole day to find him, but he visited a couple of smiths. They remembered him. And you know him as well. Perfect, Jackson added. Then what should we do? Andre asked eagerly. NOVLB //JNN. Follow him and find where he found the mountain copper. If he notices you, beat the shit out of him and then ask. His money is all yours. Understood? Mag answered before Andre. It had been more than 2 weeks since he gave someone a good beating. He always got excited when it came to beating someone. Carrying his old sack, Lucien was walking in the direction of the Bulem River. I gotta use the other 2 gates more, Lucien thought. It's suspicious always taking the same way. Andre and Mag, they're always there. The 2 gates, one in Purple Lily and the other in Nolan, were both far from his destination. Lucien sometimes would collect some mushrooms on his way back to disguise his real purpose, which took him more time. A figure flashed from behind him. Who's there? Lucien suddenly became alert. It was not the first time he found someone tracking him. Ever since his bitter fight under the sewers, he felt he became more sensitive to the surroundings now. Thanks to his sharp observation, he managed to get rid of those people who wanted to find out his secret. Pretending everything was fine, Lucien was seeking for a chance. When he arrived in a corner covered with thick grass and high trees, he dashed to a big tree with all his strength. Hiding behind it, Lucien quietly waited for the person. He was calm. He had to know who was following him to eliminate any future trouble. A moment later, a sound of heavy footsteps, together with swearing, came from the place Lucien was previously at. The sound came around the corner, very close to where Lucien was standing before. Damn it, we lost him. I was right, Andre. We should catch and beat him up. Only that way he will tell us everything. Lucien was surprised. He did not expect that the Aaron gang would notice him so quickly. Feeling disappointed, Lucien decided to leave his home and hide somewhere with his money for a few days. He was waiting for Andre and Mag to leave first. I can still become an apprentice anyway. Lucien comforted himself silently. Andre and Mag knew what Jackson would do to them if they messed up. They were arguing with each other loudly. Mag, savages can scent. Andre suddenly smacked Mag's shoulder. Hey, scent what? You said those savages are like hounds, and they can catch any scent in the wind. Andre was excited. You have savage blood. Try it. Yes. Sometimes it doesn't work, though. Mag scratched his bald head. Lucien suddenly became really nervous. He still knew too little about this new world. Raising his head slightly, Mag took a long, deep breath. Then he shouted excitedly, I got his scent. There he is. He started running towards the tree. Mag found him. As soon as Mag shouted, Lucien started running. Mag was surprisingly fast with his big muscles, and several times he almost caught Lucien. Lucien kept running through the trees to avoid Mag. But after the woods, there was the open riverside. Lucien knew he could not escape anymore. I gotta beat Mag before the other guy comes. Lucien did not panic. Compared with those crazy red-eyed rats, Mag, although a bit big, was still a human being. Lucien was prepared. He heard Mag's excited howling coming close from behind him. Suddenly, Lucien stopped. He lowered his body and pushed his leg against the ground. He butted Mag hard with all his strength. It was an unexpected attack. Mag swiftly tried to punch Lucien's head to avoid the attack, but he missed. Lucien passed right through Mag's arms. With the help of Mag's own momentum, Lucien's hard-clenched fist ran into Mag's soft belly. Mag felt a hard rock hit his stomach. As he was yelling in pain, a strong acid rose from his throat. Lucien knew a single punch could not solve the trouble completely. Thus, 2 seconds later, he viciously attacked Mag's back with his elbow. Furthermore, almost at the same time, his lifted knee went straight between Mag's legs. Ow! It was a painful howling in the best savage style, and even Andre, who always made fun of Mag's blood, would not deny that. Covering his private part, Mag was rolling back and forth on the ground in great pain, snarling angrily. Seeing all that, Andre couldn't help but feel bad for his companion, kind of feeling some of that pain as well, so he ended up slowing down. Without a second's delay, Lucien turned around and ran away immediately. He saw a shining dagger in Andre's hand. Andre chased for a little bit, but it was too late. Soon, Lucien disappeared in the woods across the river. He finally stopped beside Mag. The weaker you are, the poorer you are. Those bastards just wouldn't let you have any chance. Lucien felt aggrieved. It was 9 in the morning. Sneaking back through the gate in the district of Nolan, Lucien was carefully approaching his shack in Alto. He needed to take his money before the gangsters found his place. After hiding behind a nearby cabin for a while, when Lucien was about to get out, a bunch of ferocious guys approached towards his shack. A common-looking man dressing neatly pointed to Lucien's place. Then another burly young guy directly gave a hard kick on the broken door. The door fell on the ground, leaving behind a cloud of dust. The guy who burst the door found the shack empty and reported this to the ordinary-looking man, Jackson. "We did waste some time, but we shouldn't be late." Jackson smiled. "Although Mag and Andre are useless, they still provided us with some good information." The others knew what happened to the big guy. When Jackson mentioned Mag, they somehow felt a chilly wind pass through their legs. Andre squeezed out an embarrassing giggling. But he was still glad that he did not have to lie in bed for at least a week. "Andre, you go. See if there's anything in this pigsty." Several minutes later, Andre came out with a handful of small things. "Just some rubbish, Jackson." Sigh. Lucien regretted not hiding this stuff elsewhere. It was very easy to tell where he found them. If the Aaron gang took control of the dump site, then it would be the end of his dream to become a rich man. Rubbish. Jackson curled his lips, a pretty smart young lad. He found the orichalcum in the dump site. Trash from the palace, nobles' areas, musicians' association, mercenaries' union, all go to the dump site beside the river. They're useless for rich people, but not for us. His guess was right. Thanks to the boy, we found a new way to make money. Fiddling with a piece of metal, Jackson commanded with his iconic smile, "Smash all of his stuff. Keep the money to yourselves. The one who finds a guy will be rewarded." Jackson did not bother sending his men searching for Lucien. They also got many things to do. Time was too precious to be wasted on a nobody like Lucien. Cheering loudly, they squeezed in Lucien's little shack, started smashing his stuff. Clenching his fists and gnashing his teeth, Lucien could tell from the sound that his table, followed by his clay pot, were shattered to pieces. But he knew that he could do nothing against the gangsters with his current power. They would beat him to death, and he did not want to die like that. Law would not help him, since people above it would not care. If the witch had not gone to the cemetery, no one would have found her. Lucien's mind started wandering as the noise in the background faded. If I become a sorcerer, I can protect myself. I don't want much. After learning magic, I just need to find a place to live. I need to. Yes, I have no choice. Learning magic is dangerous, but being weak is no better. His locked-up thoughts all started resurfacing, like being summoned by the evil actions around him. Elisa's shout cut off his wondering. "You damn bastards! What the hell are you doing?" While doing her housework, Elisa heard the mess coming from Lucien's place. Trying to stop them, she yelled and approached the gangsters while waving her long spoon. "Get her away," said Jackson. Two ferocious men rolled up their sleeves and walked towards Elisa. But they underestimated the housewife standing in front of them. Auntie Elisa directly hit one of them on the forehead with her wooden spoon. Ouch! Facing the unexpected attack, the guy screamed in pain. But soon more guys joined in. Although Elisa was tall and sturdy, she was after all still a woman. A hard punch hit her shoulder, and her spoon fell onto the ground. Elisa groaned in pain, but still did not flinch. "You wretches! Stop! The inspectors are coming." Hiding behind a wall and watching all of this, Lucien's mind was filled with torment and suffering. "Lucien, are you a man?" Although he met Auntie Elisa many days ago, he did not have a very strong bond with her and her husband Joel. But now, When he saw Elisa get hurt because of him, he knew it was totally unacceptable for him to be hiding behind a woman and letting her fight for him. Fuck! Clenching his fist, Lucian took a quick glimpse at his shack and jumped out. N/O/vel/B//and.C//OM. His target was Jackson, who was standing there alone. Lucian threw himself at Jackson with all his might. Feeling extremely surprised, Jackson was suddenly knocked down by Lucian. They wrestled on the ground, and Lucian tried to hold Jackson's hands tightly with his left hand, in case the thug was carrying a dagger. Meanwhile, his right hand was trying to reach Jackson's throat. Lucian needed to capture their leader to control the whole situation. However, Jackson was not inexperienced at all. He also had his share of fighting. Rolling on the ground, Jackson did not give Lucian any chance to grab his neck. At the same time, he continuously slammed his elbow at Lucian's rib. Due to the lack of space, Jackson's hits were not very strong. But still, for Lucian, they were still unbearable. Wincing in pain, he still did not retrieve. He was almost there. He touched Jackson's throat. Suddenly, Lucian got a hard punch in his stomach. He was smashed hard on the ground by Jackson's men. Before he could stand up, fists and kicks started falling down on Lucian's body like raindrops. Lucian started rolling on the ground from unbearable pain, like a stray dog. He could barely cover his vital parts. Lucian's mind started wandering again. Everything seemed unreal and was fading away like in a movie. Auntie Elisa's crying voice came from another world. Stop! Stop! At that moment, Lucian made up his mind. Whatever it took, he must become strong. Jackson was standing on the other side, looking at Lucian rolling back and forth on the ground. He trampled him hard and stopped his men. His friend is a knight squire. Let's not bring ourselves trouble. Although it was rumored that Rose and Aaron had some connections with a high noble, a gang still had to be relatively disciplined, or it would be eliminated by the church or nobles in no time. Lucian was lying on the ground with blood coming out of his nose and mouth. Jackson smiled to him. Actually, I respect your courage and intelligence. I really do. But my boy, don't be too greedy. I hope you understand what's yours and what's not. Yes, Lucian answered simply in a hoarse voice. Lucian's answer was a little bit weird for him, but Jackson did not bother too much. Jackson and his men left in triumph, together with Lucian's collections and 45 fells. The morning sunshine was not very strong. Lucian was lying in the sun, covered with wounds and blood. Staring at the clear blue sky, breathing the fresh air gently, Lucian forgot the pain. His mind was waving like a deep ocean. Lucian realized that everything he had experienced before led him to his final decision, learning magic. Although he knew he had to be even more careful and cautious in the future, at the same time, he felt more relaxed than ever before after making up his mind. N/O/vel/B//in.C//OM. There was even a smile on Lucian's bruised face. He felt he had genuinely grown up within the past couple of days, much faster than in his own world. The anger, the feeling of inferiority, and the sense of insecurity had blended together and pushed him to that decision. And he was also gifted with the library. So why not? Lucian asked himself, feeling relieved from his long-time repression. My poor Evans. Oh, my poor Evans. Are you all right? Elisa tried to hold Lucian's hand. The slight movement of his arms and legs made Lucian wince in pain. I'm okay. Auntie Elisa. They didn't want to kill me, fortunately. Auntie Elisa held Lucian's arm and led him back to her place. She kept swearing with great anger. These bastards would be hanged and tortured in hell by endless flames. After cleaning the wounds, Elisa was about to ask Lucian what happened today. Before that, it seemed like she suddenly thought of something, and her hands acted a bit awkward. Lucian. Yes, Auntie Elisa? This is the thing. John's coming back today. Can you keep this to yourself without letting him know? You know John. You're his best friend. If he hears about it, I'm afraid that he wouldn't be able to constrain himself from taking revenge. As a knight squire, he would be in big trouble then. Knowing John was Auntie Elisa and Uncle Joel's great hope, Lucian nodded. Of course. It's not a big deal, actually. Lucian put a hard smile. Elisa held Lucian's hand, with tears in her eyes. Thank you, my little Evans. Are you trying to hide anything from me? It was John's voice. Wearing the gray knight's suit, John was standing by the door. Neither Elisa nor Lucian noticed him. Elisa answered hurriedly, Nothing, nothing. You came back earlier? John walked in and pulled a chair for himself. He sat down beside Lucian. The Grand Duke summoned Lord Van, and I followed him back to Alto. Mom, I'm a knight squire now. I'm not an imprudent young boy anymore. Then he turned to Lucian. You look much worse than the last time we got thrashed together. What happened? Don't try to lie. I bet lots of neighbors were there and saw it. John added. Lucian looked at Elisa, who had already compromised the secret. Then he told John the story in full detail. During his talking, Lucian could feel the tension in the air due to John's feelings, which was the same that he felt from the guards he fought together in the sewers. Of course, John was very angry, but he managed to calm himself down quickly. He patted Lucian's hand gently and smiled. You're really clever, the most clever among us. Find money in trash, really good for you. I'm sure you will do a good job if you learn to read. Then, shrugging his shoulders, John went outside of the room and fetched a long wooden club from the kitchen. Oh no! Elisa sighed. Mom, you know I gotta do this for my friend. But John, Lord Vin— Yes, John, Lucian hurriedly asked. Don't go. It's not a big deal. Look at me. I'm okay. John turned around and shook his head. Lord Vin always told us, as a knight, one is supposed to protect the weak and fight against the violent. As a squire, I already regard myself as a knight and try to follow the knight's belief. His eyes were intent, his gestures expansive. Lucian, my friend, was bullied, and his place got ruined. If I remain silent simply to no piss Lord Van off, my inner guiltiness will never leave me. Yes, maybe I will not be able to awaken the blessing anymore because I broke the rules, but I'll be faithful to my beliefs. Lord Van will be on my side. I believe. I know, John. I know. But Elisa got tears in her eyes. John hugged his mom and comforted her gently. It's okay, Mom. I'm not going to kill anyone. I will not overdo it. Look, I'm holding a club, not a blade. Can you trust me, Mom? Finally, Elisa nodded with great effort. Do be careful, John. They're the ones who have to be careful, Mom. Grabbing the club, John smiled with confidence. When he was about to leave, Lucian called him from behind. Wait, John. Yes. John looked back. With all his remaining strength, Lucian stood up from the bed. He felt his blood was flowing fast, burning his body. We are going together. Lucian's smile looked kind of funny with his swollen mouth. But John could tell his determination. He laughed. There's another club in the kitchen. Let's go like when we were kids. Holding the club, Lucian comforted Auntie Elisa in a low voice when he passed by her. I'll watch him. Don't worry. It was easy for them to find out where Jackson and his men went by asking around. When they were on their way, John asked Lucian, all of a sudden, Do you believe in justice, Lucian? He sounded confused. Yes, I do. Why do you ask? John lowered his head but did not stop. I do too. But Lucian, I am not as noble and brave as I claim to be. I do this only because you're my friend. If it was someone else, I don't know. I don't think I would. I'm used to picking my fights well, avoiding doing anything that would be beyond my capability. I'm selfish. I only want to protect my family and friends. I'm a coward. Am I not? I don't think so. Every knight, or say, every person, has a priority. Some pursue justice, some loyalty, some mercy. You chose family. Only when a person knows what he really wants to protect does he stick to justice. Or justice would be just like the clouds. Nothing substantial. Lucian just realized that John was still a young lad like himself, no matter how mature he appeared to be. Thanks to the book about the knight's spirit from his mental library, he was scrabbling up his sentences to comfort John. Now he was much better at looking up information among all the books in the library. You really think so? John still looked puzzled. Sure. If you're capable, will you protect the weak, fight against the wicked, and uphold justice? If I'm capable, of course I will. So you're still a knight of justice. If you were not capable, you would fight and die for nothing. You got to be able to protect yourself first. Only then you can protect those who need your help. Lucien felt he was quite suitable for being a mentor. John seemed relieved, and he started smiling. Every time I asked Lord Venn about this, he told me I was too inexperienced to understand. But Lucien, you've grown up too. You're good at comforting, and maybe you're right. But I'm still longing for the genuine justice. Once, Lord Venn told us a story about a legendary knight's sword. The sword had divine power inside, but looked just like the common ones. Its hilt was made purely of wood, without any gems, pearls, or anything out of ordinary. The nobles and the high-level knights wouldn't take a second look at the sword. John's eyes were on the far distance, and he continued. But actually the sword was far more powerful than they thought, especially when it was used to fight against evil. What impressed me most was the words engraved on the sword. Justice is pale, compared with splendor and power. But everyone can be its representative. Wealthy or poor, intelligent or illiterate, warrior or farmer. Justice is pale, but it is everywhere. Pale justice, that's the name of the sword. It disappeared along with a grand Arcana knight into the dark mountain range. John became excited. His depression was gone. Lucien laughed. Then our slogan today is going to be for justice. For justice. John waved his club. A few minutes later, they saw Jackson, who was walking on the broad street of the market. A bunch of guys. John stopped and turned to Lucien. You just got injured, and you haven't received any formal training. Remember, Lucien, don't panic, and don't stop moving. We will keep changing positions. Don't let his men surround you. Use your club to keep them away, so their daggers won't harm you. You hear me, Lucien? John tried to advise Lucien as much as possible. He was worried that Lucien might lose control and launch an imprudent attack. However, Lucien had some decent experience before. No worries, John. I've survived an invasion into a witch's chamber before. Hiding their clubs behind their backs, they approached Jackson in a quick pace. It was a pretty busy street in the market, only 10 minutes away from one of Erangang's hideouts. Merchants, mercenaries, and adventurers were gathering there, so no one paid attention to them. They looked at each other when they were just a few steps away from Jackson, nodded, and dashed towards the gangsters, holding the clubs tightly in their hands. Lucien recognized the guy who kicked him hard. Without a second thought, he wielded his club right towards the thug's head. If you're not trained or not strong enough, wield it hard with all your might. That's what Lucien learned. Before the guy could notice, he got bludgeoned bitterly in his lower jaw. Then he passed out and fell onto the ground directly. John, on the other side, quickly got rid of another guy. As a knight squire, John was really good at it. Although he did not aim at the head, his precise strike directly dislocated the guy's right arm. 2 guys were down, but the harsh scream from one of them drew the other's attention. Jackson was surprised, but his eyes became vicious in an instant. His men pulled out their daggers. The sharp blades reflected the surrounding light. The pedestrians started scattering away quickly, leaving them more room to keep moving. Lucien and John kept running into different directions. They could not stop. The key to this strategy was not to spend too much time on a single enemy in order to make sure they wouldn't be flanked. The strategy worked quite well. One more of the thugs was rolling on the ground. But it was also very hard to keep moving all the time. John was constraining himself. He did not want to be in trouble for hurting someone seriously. But his concern became his weakness. Some guys on the ground were still in conditions to fight and seized the chance to pull out their daggers and stab John's ankles. Busy dodging their low blades, John did not notice the others move to surround him. Thanks to John's refined fighting skills, he barely avoided several strikes. But the circle of daggers was getting tighter and tighter. Lucien turned back to help John, his club whistling directly towards the back of a thug's head. "Johnny, watch out!" Warned by the other gang members, the man named Johnny dodged by bending forward quickly and avoided Lucien's attack. However, that was enough for John, who seized the chance and broke the formation through the gap left by Johnny. However, the latter jumped up immediately and made the movement to throw his dagger at John's back. Bang! Before the dagger flew away from his hand, Lucien pounded bitterly into Johnny's backbone. This time Lucien did not run away. Instead, he waited for a second chance to strike Johnny. Suddenly, a cold feeling came from Lucien's own back and immediately turned into agonizing pain. A dagger cut him badly, but Lucien did not panic. He knew John would not hold his hand anymore, and a determined and angry Night Squire would be unstoppable when facing a bunch of gang bastards. Unlike Lucien, John never missed. Wielding his club with anger, he came to support Lucien. Watching the battle unfold, Jackson took a step back and started escaping. "You guys stop them," he shouted while running. The rest of his men started stabbing crazily. The shining blades came from different directions. Lucien got another cut on his right hand, and the blood came out immediately. His club almost flew out of his hand. "Are you all right?" John stood in front of Lucien, sheltering him from the enemies. "I'm okay." Lucien shook his head. "We gotta stop Jackson from bringing reinforcements." NOVLB //JNN. John nodded. "Remember, use your club to keep the daggers away from you. Follow me." He struck down once more and started chasing Jackson. The rest of the guys slowed down and did not pursue any further, because they saw Jackson was already quite a distance away from them. However, after becoming the overseer, Jackson gained some weight from the lack of proper exercise. Thus, he ran slower and slower. Keep moving, almost there," Jackson encouraged himself. Unfortunately, John, a squire in perfect shape, had another plan in mind. He was slowly gaining ground, and, when the distance was proper, he swung his club with all his strength right into Jackson's back. Jackson felt like all his guts almost gushed out through his throat. With a loud groan, he fell on the ground, twitching in great pain. Then a night boot stamped hard on his back. Lucien arrived a while later, panting heavily. He was more than tired after all the running and fighting, especially because of the bleeding wounds that covered his body. It was his anger that was keeping him up all the way here. Before Jackson could make any threat, John turned him over with his boot and pointed downwards, smiling and gasping. "You first, Lucien." "Thanks, buddy." After taking several deep breaths, Lucien raised his club high and took a mighty swing at Jackson's face. "How dare!" "Ow!" Several teeth burst forth from Jackson's mouth, preventing the rest of his words from coming out. He was choking in his own blood. His ears were buzzing. His eyes were seeing stars. It was a F*** King hard one. "Those damned little bastards." What do you want?" Jackson lisped with a mixture of blood and saliva in his mouth. With great dizziness, he noticed his voice was like coming from another world. "We want nothing more than justice." Kicking away Jackson's dagger, John answered seriously, "You beat Lucien and my mom, which we've paid you back. And you also robbed him and destroyed his place. You gotta compensate. John, if I remember correctly, you're a Night Squire, aren't you? Fighting on the street breaks your rules. Don't let Lord Ven down, young lad." Jackson spat out blood from his mouth. "You've come to this extent. You don't care about your little brother and parents?" He continued his threatening. "I guess you still want more, don't you?" Lucien was weighing his club. Facing violence, Jackson shut his mouth. His anger and shame mixed like a pot of boiling water. Facing Jackson's threat, John smiled. "According to the code, a knight shall protect his family and the weak. I don't see my fault here. Actually, most people wouldn't stand for gangsters. Don't you think so?" "You need proof," Jackson yelled. A gang was often very good at keeping a witness silent. John looked a bit hesitant. What Elisa told him bothered him again. "Proof?" Lucien smiled contemptuously. "John's a Night Squire, while you're a gangster. What else do you need?" From what he learned in the Copper Coronet, Lucien was aware that in the Duchy of Orveret, knights were the real nobles, and their recognized squires also held status. Lucien believed Jackson definitely wouldn't dare slander a Night Squire. And he had no reason as well. A gangster was also a businessman. Jackson couldn't gain anything big from Lucien and John from doing so. Jackson, as Lucien expected, did not retort. Yes, they could put a Night Squire into prison, but how much effort and resources they would have to use. Aaron, of course, would not do this for him. Jackson knew. Especially recently, something was going wrong in Alto. The city was like a whirlpool where different powers were mingling. Aaron was often absent from the meetings, planning something. Knowing he was no longer in an advantageous position, Jackson tried his best to repress his anger and shame. "How much do you want, then?" He lowered his head and tried to make an agreement. "I only got 2 nars with me." Lucien turned to John. "The sheriffs are coming. We'd better leave before they arrive." John nodded. "Well, 2 nars." Lucien was actually quite happy with the result. Knowing his table and chairs basically worth nothing, 2 nars were more than 2 times what he had lost. By the way, he had already moved the rest of his money and hid it under the ruins of the witch's place. All the gangsters took away were just 40 fells and some useless rubbish. Pulling out a small bag, Jackson threw it to John. The bag was pretty empty except for 2 shining silver nars. "I left the rest to my men. Let's go, John." Lucien raised his chin towards the coming sheriffs and grabbed his club. He did not want to put John in trouble. Soon, they disappeared at the end of the street. All right, stop. We're safe now." Leaning against the wall, Lucien was panting heavily and felt as if his lungs were about to explode. He let his body fall on the ground, smiling. "Finally, I can't run anymore." John sat down beside Lucien, also gasping for air. "Me neither. It was pretty cool, wasn't it?" "What?" Lucien's mind started slowing down and feeling relaxed. "The fight. I can't remember the last time I had a good fight like this." They were just sitting on the ground, gasping and looking at the blue sky. "Yeah, it was cool." Lucien smiled. It felt like a heavy rock had been lifted from his mind. All the pain, anger, and confusion Lucien hid at the bottom of his heart was gone like floating clouds. His mind was thinking clear, and he was more relaxed than ever before. Also, Lucien knew that he still had a real friend in this world who would shield him and fight for him, regardless of the cost. Lucien started laughing aloud. "What?" John wondered. "The future. I'm thinking. After I learn how to read, after I make some money, I'll go traveling across the continent to see different sceneries, to know more foreign tales, to taste many cuisines." Lucien stopped and stared at the blue sky. But he continued thinking to himself. "I will learn magic. I will understand how this world works. I will discover the truth of the world. And then I will find a way back home, for my parents, for the friends in my world, and in this life, for myself." Lucien had collected 3 nars. He knew he had to start his learning as soon as possible. Who knew if the gangsters would take secret revenge on him secretly? The outside pressure from the bullies and his inner motivation mixed together and made learning magic the only way for Lucien to achieve his desires. "Traveling?" John laughed. "It's not safe, Lucien. Although most of the dark creatures in the east of our country have been eliminated by the church, they're still breeding like rats. Cynocephalus, vicious goblins, gnolls. Sorry, Lucien, I don't think your dream will come true. At least you cannot go alone. n/o/vel/b//and.c//om. I wonder, are they edible? The things you mentioned?" Lucien asked subconsciously. For him, the most effective way for eliminating some overpopulated animals was turning them into food. "You, what the hell are you thinking about?" John was baffled. "All right," Lucien answered with a bit of disappointment. "If I can turn into a real knight in the future, what will I do?" John asked himself with a lot of expectation. "I think I'd be the same as you, Lucien. I also want to travel to see what the world looks like outside of Alto. I wish it were really beautiful, like the bards described. By the way," John said to him, "be careful in the next few days. Don't stray too far from the city walls. You never know what these bastards will do." Lucien nodded. "I know. And when you see Lord Vin, remember to tell him what you did right away and ask for punishment yourself." John did not expect Lucien could be this considerate. He was also glad that his lifetime friend still cared a lot about him, even though sometimes he felt Lucien had changed quite a bit. "I will. I wish I could teach you how to read, but I cannot read either." John sighed. Only the high-level knight squires receive classes on how to read. He looked a bit upset. "John, you've done a lot for me." Lucien laid his hand on John's shoulder. "I'm grateful for having a friend like you. I really am." John could see Lucien's sincere eyes. Soon he smiled. "I know. Who doesn't want to have such a great friend like me? Let's go home. Mom's waiting for us. Joel was home when they came back. Elisa was walking back and forth in the living room. It was such a relief for Elisa seeing them come back, better yet in one piece. Opening his arms, Joel grinned to them. "Welcome back, heroes." And he gave both of them a big hug. "You guys remind me of my old days." Joel lowered his voice and winked when he turned his back to Elisa. "Dad, you and Mom gotta be even more careful for some time." John was kind of worried. "It's not a big deal. Those bastards only give the weak a hard time. You once beat the shit out of them, you're no longer on their bullying list. Your mom and I will be fine." Joel left some space so Elisa could treat Lucien's wounds, and then he turned to John, dead serious. "Actually, John, you should have asked Lord Ven first. You're his squire, his representative. Your behavior matters to his decency." "Yes, Dad." John was aware of his rashness. "Lucien told me to take the initiative and ask for Lord Ven's forgiveness, and I will." Joel nodded. "Lucien's right." A while later, Lucien excused himself to find some usurer in Copper Coronet. He needed to start his studies as soon as possible, and thus he was prepared to face the risks in case he for some reason didn't manage to pay it back. Before Lucien left, Joel stopped him. When he turned around, he saw Joel was holding an old plain purse. "There are 8 nars in it." Joel put it into Lucien's hand. "Take it." Joel, Lucien was surprised. He never thought borrowing money from them, because Evan was still young. "Andy, Elisa?" She was smiling to him. "That's all we have for now. Not too much, but enough for you to start studying." But Lucien's eyes became filled with tears on the verge of falling. "But this is all your savings." I can't." Joel laughed. "Before your father passed away, he helped us more than we could ever hope for. Now you are in need. It's our responsibility to support you. After you learn to read, and then find a good job, you can pay us back easily. I'll work hard." Lucien nodded with confidence. "All the money you have now can pay the fees for 2 months. If we work together, at least you can have a teacher every 3 or 4 months. That's my plan." Joel had regarded Lucien's study as their shared responsibility. Lucien grabbed the little purse tight. Tears were falling from his eyes. "Thank you, Uncle Joel, Annie, Elisa, and you, John." At the same time, Lucien made up his mind to pay them back with a better life. After learning some magic, Lucien knew he had to leave Alto as soon as possible. He could not put this family under any kind of risk. After leaving their place, Lucien still headed towards Copper Coronet. But this time, instead of finding an usurer, he was looking for a teacher. The afternoon sunlight sent some light into the noisy pub. Bards were singing, and mercenaries were talking loudly. Lucien noticed that there were beautiful women sitting beside the bar tables. Pushing through the crowd, Lucien finally squeezed his way to the counter. "Any drink?" Cone asked without raising his hairy head. "It's me, Lucien." Cone was surprised when he saw Lucien's face. "What did you do to yourself?" His beard was slanted with concern. "Wait. Jackson came and asked about you earlier. Are you in trouble, my boy?" Lucien was not quite willing to repeat what happened one more time. "I'm fine, Cone. The problem was solved. I'm here to look for a teacher who can teach me how to read." "Oh, you made it. You didn't rob the gangsters, did you?" Now Cone was even more surprised. Lucien had no choice but to explain what happened briefly to Cone. After hearing that, Cone was very impressed. "Lucien, you and John are finally real men now. I'm proud of you lads." Gulping his ale, his face turned red. "But be careful, both you and John. Although chances are slim that they dare take revenge on a knight squire, but still, be wary of the bastards. You never know." Lucien nodded seriously. Cone pulled out a paper, on which there was a list of strange patterns and symbols. "I cannot read," he laughed and continued, "but as a pub owner, you got to put down something to help you remember." On the list, there were a bunch of scholars who registered here and were willing to teach. While Cone was speaking the names out loud, Lucien noticed a familiar name, which was written on a note beside the list. "Victor? You just said Mr. Victor?" Lucien stopped Cone. "Yes, you know him? I met him once in the association." Lucien stared at the name. "But he's a musician, isn't he?" "You put a note beside his name as well." Twirling his mustache, Cone took another look at the list and nodded. Yeah, it's the same Victor we're talking about. I heard that he's going to present a play in the hall. Last time I saw him, he was quite busy. Cone laughed. That's why he had to. Having a chance to play into the Psalm Hall is even harder than you think. I heard this from other guests as well. Cone climbed on a bar chair. 6 months ago, Mr. Victor got the invitation from the hall. Since then, he turned down all his other presentations, even the one in Syracuse, to focus on his preparation. He was digging into his savings for the past couple of months. Cone shrugged his shoulders. But why doesn't he find another job related to music? Lucien asked. I have no idea, boy. Cone took another sip of his ale. Those musicians tend to be quite sensitive or say even crazy sometimes. I guess probably Mr. Victor also needed something to be his distraction. Who knows, those artists? Mr. Victor made an impression on Lucien last time when they met in the association. Compared with the others that he did not even know, Lucien felt the musician would be a good choice. How can I find Mr. Victor, then? He asked. The Gissou district was named after the most well-known instrument, the Gissou violin, and was where most musicians in alto were gathered. Big trees stood on both sides of the street, through whose branches the sunshine scattered into slightly trembling golden fragments that formed patterns on the ground. Light mixed with shadow. The street was like a painting. It took Lucien quite a long time to find the address Cone offered. After getting lost a few times, finally he was standing in front of Victor's place, in 12 Sneva Street. It was a 2-floor small building covered with green vines. Everything was quiet and elegant here. If all went well, Lucien was going to have his reading lessons for the following 2 months, which could help him change his whole life. Knocking at the door gently, Lucien got a bit nervous. Soon a servant showed up inside the iron gate. Seeing Lucien, a boy wearing rough and old clothes, he frowned. Yes? He asked coldly. After Lucien explained, he was still in doubt. 5 nars a month. Pay first. Are you sure? As Lucien expected, he pulled out his money from the bag. Yes, I'm sure. The servant was surprised. He couldn't believe this poor young boy could afford the price. As a servant of a famous musician, he earned 10 nars a month and could only save 1 every month, sometimes even less. Mr. Victor enjoys high reputation. He has some acquaintances in the town hall. Opening the gate, the servant was still eyeing Lucien with suspicion. Who knew where the guy got so much money, he thought. N/O/vel/B/in.C//om. Lucien just smiled without saying anything. The servant's attitude was within his expectation. Feel offended? That belonged to the wealthy and powerful. He followed the servant through the garden and stopped in front of the wooden gate, waiting there. A couple of minutes later, the servant showed up again. Follow me inside. Later you may give the tuition fee to Mr. Athy, the steward. It was quite a spacious hall, decorated with a tea table, some brown couches, and small desks. On the other side, there was a long dining table, made of fine rosewood. Victor got a few students here as well. His study was too small for all of them, so they just sat in the hall. There were 5 boys and 3 girls sitting there, all pretty young, probably between 13 and 20. Quills and papers were lying in front of them on the small round tables. Some of them were transcribing something, while some were humming or reading in a low voice. According to Lucien's observation, the students also came from different backgrounds. Some were of humble birth, and the others were dressing quite decently. The latter ones were usually from noble families. Most of them were not qualified to inherit their family titles and could not activate the blessing either. For those children, becoming a graceful musician was quite a good choice. Mr. Victor, wearing his red jacket, was moving around and helping the students one by one. Looking around, Lucien noticed the steward in his decent black suit. From his black and white mixed hair and his wrinkled face, one could tell he was not young anymore. But he was standing there straight and serious. The steward looked like a gentleman, Lucien thought. He walked towards him and asked, trying to keep his volume down. Excuse me, are you Mr. Athy? Yes, I am. May I know your name and your past study? Yes, sure. I'm Lucien. Lucien Evans. I never learned how to read before. While he was talking, Lucien took out 5 nars. Taking the money, Athy was impressed. Apparently, The young lad was from the poor district. Most young people in Audieron were quite rude, based on his experience, while Lucien appeared pretty polite and mature. Then Athie walked to Victor and whispered to him a little bit. Victor turned around and nodded to Lucien kindly, pointing at a spare armchair. The students just noticed Lucien and were looking at their new classmate at the door curiously. Black hair, eyes, and well-formed features, the new guy had a good-looking face. But he was wearing linen clothes and plain shoes. Although they were clean, they could tell from the first sight that Lucien came from a poor background. A poor wants to learn how to read? That was their first thought. Soon most of them lowered their heads and went back to study again. Only the ones from ordinary families were still peeking at him carefully. As soon as Lucien sat down, the boy next to him moved a bit away, subconsciously, as if Lucien stank. Lucien did not feel offended. He shook his hands slightly and pulled out his new paper and quill. They were new. Lucien bought them with his left fells. Victor came to Lucien a while later, with a black hard-covered book in his hand. Standard pronunciation of lingua franca and basic grammar. Very suitable for a beginner. Turn to page 1, chapter 1. We start from the pronunciation of the 32 letters. Victor said gently. Lucien's hands were trembling slightly. Carefully, he opened the book like turning to a new page of his future. Within his expectation, the words in the book were the same as the ones in the magic tomes he collected at the witch's chamber. He knew how to learn a language well. As long as he learned the pronunciation of the letters and the basic rules of spelling, he could learn more by himself outside of the class by reading intensively. Victor repeated the pronunciations patiently 2 to 3 times on each word. Lucien followed him carefully and wrote down some notes on the paper. Read them until you becomes more fluent. Victor said, when it's good enough, we'll move to basic spelling and grammar. What he said was actually more like an encouragement. As a beginner, it would be almost impossible for Lucien to match the sounds and the letters in such a short amount of time. The notes Lucien jotted down were Chinese characters. He tried to relate these letters with his mother tongue, just like he had done when he started learning English. Again, Lucien read through it and he stayed focused so the knowledge would enter his spirit library. As expected, a new shelf labeled Common Tongue appeared, on which there was a black hardcover book full of the strange characters, the same one that was lying in front of him on reality. Lucien opened the book in the library, but found out only the first few pages were there, and the rest of the book was simply blank. He went through the book on the table quickly, and, as he imagined, the spiritual version became complete instantly. Yes! Lucien cheered in his mind. With the help of the library, Lucien became more confident. It was very hard from the beginning. Several times later, he became better and better. After what seemed like the 15th time, he got finally satisfied with his ability to remember them. Of course, Lucien knew this would not last long. If he did not review that on a regular basis, they would be forgotten very soon. At the same time, Lucien also found out that his spiritual power, which helped him with the spellcasting before, could help improve his memory as well. At this time, Victor came back to teach Lucien again. After a while helping the students, his face looked tired but also more relaxed. Probably Cohn was right. Victor was using teaching as a distraction. Have you memorized all of them? Victor asked, smiling. Let me check it. Like a primary student facing his teacher, Lucien was a bit nervous. He did forget some of them, but mind then drifted into his library, and he started reading according to his notes. It wasn't Lucien's intention to cheat, but both his money and time were limited. He had plenty of time reviewing them again in the library later. Victor was surprised. Have you learned before? Some of the students raised their heads and looked at Lucien. No, I haven't, answered Lucien. Impressive, Victor commended. Then we will start learning how to spell. While some students were surprised, some of them scorned. In their eyes, Lucien must have learned it before and was just another scheming guy who wanted to impress Mr. Victor and earn the chance to be his formal music student. Inside the study room, the 3 most noble among them had started learning music. However, that did not distract Lucien at all. There was only one goal in his mind: learn as much as possible. Time is money. A day's learning cost a lot. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break. Victor clapped gently and then walked upstairs. At the same time, The servants came with tea and fruit. The scent of jasmine and lemon filled the room. Some of the fruits Lucien knew, and some he did not. A young guy decently dressed smiled at the classmates around him, with a piece of tablature in his hand. It seems like Mr. Victor got some inspiration. We may call it a day now, if his inspiration keeps flowing. He looked a bit older than Lucien. His eyes were long and narrow, and his nose straight. Among them, this guy was pretty outstanding. A noble girl in a wine-colored dress was sitting right beside him. If class finishes earlier, we're going to have an extra one during the weekend. Don't get too excited, she responded in a lazy voice, but I do hope Mr. Victor finishes his new song for the concert as soon as possible. So we will finally be able to start practicing with the orchestra. Sitting in the room, merely reading tablatures and playing flute by myself can never compete with a real rehearsal. Around 17 or 18, she was pretty good-looking. Hair long and bright red, like fire, thick and sexy lip, and her waist was not tightened like most noble girls. Otherwise, she would not be able to play the flute well. Looking at her serious face, Lot laughed. The first violinist, the man who is as handsome as a silver moon. You like Rhine, don't you? Felicia. The first violinist, also called concertmaster, played a significant role in a symphony orchestra. When the conductor was absent, the first violinist would take the baton. I just feel he has excellent skills, much better than the last one, Felicia argued, but her face flushed. Don't you think his solo for violin Sonata No. 1 in G minor was really impressive? Talking about music, Lot became serious and excited. They started discussing sonatas and suites. Other noble students also joined them, showing their great interest. Even a pretty insightful comment made by a brown-haired girl with ordinary family background won their consent. In alto, music was another common tongue. However, consciously or subconsciously, the noble students still often ignored the others, while the common ones treated Lucien indifferently and tried to get close to the ones of higher status. For noble students, it was likely that the ordinary and the poor did not even deserve their attention. There were no common things between them, as they had come from different worlds. There were no bitter words nor scorn, but the cold wall was always there, preventing those of different social statuses from getting along. But for Lucien, none of these mattered. He was trying to make full use of every minute or even second, absorbing the knowledge like a dry sponge thrown into an ocean. Some of their humming came into Lucien's ears. He found music here was very similar to that of Earth. There were just some differences on notes. After a while, Lucien raised his head. The students were still discussing. Lucien took a sip from his teacup and dove into his book again. Unfortunately, Mr. Victor's inspiration did not last long. Several minutes later, he walked downstairs with a tired and anxious face. Going back to teaching definitely helped him a lot. Lucien worked hard. By the end of the class, Lucien remembered most of the spelling rules and stored them in his spirit library. Their study ended around 4:10 in the afternoon. Except for Lot, Felicia, and another noble teen named Herodotus, who stayed to practice with instruments. The rest of the students left the hall in a row. Out of the hall, there were 2 carriages waiting. The brown horses were tall and strong, snorting. The 2 noble students were surely envied by the rest. Most nobles must maintain their decent look no matter if they were actually doing well or not. The carriages left in a cloud of dust. The other 3 students, however, headed towards Purple Lily District as a group, chatting and laughing. And thus Lucien was left behind, reviewing what he learned in his mind like a nerd. You're learning from Mr. Victor? He's the top musician. After dinner, Joel was quite excited. Little Evans, are you really going to carry on my music dream? Every dog has its day, Uncle Joel. Probably I can, Lucien replied playfully. After coming back to his home, lying in his almost broken, shaky bed, Lucien entered into his library and started reading one of the magic notes, trying to understand the words in it. Of course, Lucien was not expecting that he could learn how to read within one day's study. He was just trying to read some to reinforce his memory. As expected, Lucien did not find anything specially useful in the following 4 hours before he fell asleep. He read about 10 pages, but most of them felt like independent words instead of meaningful sentences, probably because so many words in the notes about magic were really uncommon. For sure, Lucian had his own guesses of the meaning of some of them. But it was magic. He had to be more than careful before actually taking actions. Lucian did not want to die because of a stupid misreading mistake. Fortunately, the previous owner of the notes treated it also like a diary. Some of her thoughts and experiences were written down as well. For this part, the witch used common words and grammar, from which Lucian managed to know the history of those magic notes, or say books. The witch was born in the last sorcerer family of the destroyed ancient Sylvanus magic empire. Her family hid into their old castle deep into the mountains to avoid the church's slaughtering, ever since Alto was taken over. But after hundreds of years there, the population of the family declined dramatically. In the end, there were just 3 left: the witch and her parents. The witch's parents died in an accident when they tried to summon a creature whose name Lucian was not able to read. Then the witch became an orphan and she inherited 2 magic books: astrology and magic elements, and common magic-related materials illustration. Lucian wished the notes were relatively complete so he could understand it. Otherwise, he would have to learn the dying Sylvanas language, which, so to speak, was impossible. Almost all of the jobs Copper Cornet could offer were under the control of the Aaron gang. Lucian lost his job again. He had to dig into his savings recently to support himself. But it was also nice that Lucian could seize the chance staying focused on his study, as well as avoiding the possible revenge from the gang. Joel was still playing on the busy streets in the administrative district, while Elisa was doing laundries for the association. Both of them were relatively far from the market area, where the Aaron gang tyrannized the most. They all agreed that Lucian still ranked first among them regarding being in danger. They warned Lucian not to leave the city, not to go to anywhere deserted, and even told him to be alert during bedtime in case some bastards tried to burn down his shack. So, after washing his face and finishing his hard brown bread softened in boiling water, Lucian felt there was nothing for him to do. But the feeling did not last more than a minute. Soon Lucian went outside and found an open field. He started to practice sword with a wood stick following John's direction. Lucian longed for strength to protect himself, even though he knew his training was too late. John told Lucian that after 16 years old, the chance of a person being blessed was very slim, close to none, unless he received the holy light water from the church. Lucian also kept Jackson's dagger handy, in case of any danger. After practicing, Lucian went back home. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. The sun in the sky just started showing its real power. Taking a short rest, Lucian opened his books again and started reviewing. He was much more diligent and self-disciplined than ever before. 12. Sneva Street Gasu. You have never really learned these before? Victor asked with great surprise. None of them? Lucian's progress was more than impressive. He answered all the questions perfectly and fluently. He even asked some questions he found in spelling, which most students could not notice at all until they started having a solid foundation. With just one day's study, Lucian had almost caught up with his classmates Colin and Renee. The 2 students from common background had been studying here for more than 3 months. Was Lucian a genius? Or just a liar? The students were guessing. I swear I have not, Mr. Victor. We're already speaking common tongues in our lives, are we? I can't read, but I know the connections between the letters and sounds are more important. I used my imagination, Lucian explained. He wanted people to believe he was just smart, instead of regarding him as an incomprehensible monster, which would possibly bring him trouble. For sure, Lucian did not tell him about the library. Victor nodded and smiled approvingly. Good, very good. You're gifted in learning language. Lucian was envied by most students in the class. Hearing Victor's commendation, Lot and Felicia, who had been learning from Victor for 5 years, exchanged a look. It sounds pretty useful. Felicia nodded slightly with her hands crossed over her lap. As a noble girl, she always sat straight. Lot was about to shrug his shoulders, but was stopped by the thought that the gesture might not look elegant. Facing Felicia, his longtime competitor, Lot tended to be more careful. The poor speak the common tongue as well. They just don't know how to spell and read. It's always better than starting from scratch, isn't it? He also added, even if they learn it, it won't be much useful for learning music. I have my own idea for learning music. Not like you. Felicia responded sharply. You're gifted, but gift cannot last long. If I were you, I'd spend more time on practicing instead of fooling around with girls. She then looked at Lucien. Even the poor guy, if he starts learning music, he will probably do a better job than you. She smiled with her bright, beautiful teeth. All the classmates believed that Lucien wanted to become a musician. They did not know the actual simple reason why Lucien chose Victor as his teacher. In the eyes of the common folk, choosing a teacher represented one's future path. For example, if a person wanted to be an official in the town hall or the court, he or she would definitely choose scholars with law or history background instead of a musician. But all careers needed to be recognized by nobles. Only then it would indicate real success. If he's better than me, he's better than you, Felicia. Lot sneered. Felicia was about to say more, but noticed Victor was looking in this direction. She raised her hand and tidied her red hair, then lowered her head and went back to her studies. Victor started speeding up Lucien's learning. Soon they finished the rest of the spelling rules and moved to basic grammar, which was exactly what Lucien was expecting. Friday, the last day of Lucien's study this week. After a few days learning, Lucien had mastered most of the grammar. Were it not for lacking vocabulary, Lucien could even start learning magic now. He had made a big progress with the magic notes as well, in which the witch explained why she came to Alto. Along with the increase in my spiritual power, it has become harder for me to immerse myself in meditation. Shall I try the meditating the way only real sorcerers can? It was too dangerous. I almost died. Perhaps I should improve the apprentice meditation based on my experience. I got lost completely. No wonder all the great seniors didn't make any improvement. I'm too shallow, too arrogant. Even the magic structure of the first level is too complicated. I can't find a way to build the magic mark model. It's driving me crazy. I have the potion already, but without the model, I can't move forward to be a real sorceress. I don't know. Maybe I should try to make a potion of Magic Gate. It contains a level 1 magic in it. Perhaps I can make it this way. I need snow gorse. Maybe I should go to Alto. It's the biggest city on the West Continent. There are also many hidden sorcerers and sorceress. It's dangerous, but I shall still have a chance. So far, that was all Lucien could read from the notes. He was very curious about her experience in Alto, but decided to finish the remaining few pages later tonight. Today, Lucien also wanted to borrow a common tongue dictionary and put it into his library. If everything went well, Lucien could start learning magic on the weekend. His heart was full of hope.